My entitled manager claims that I'm stealing company's time and that she'll get me fired if I don't work the exact hours that I'm supposed to work. And despite the fact that she is literally just filling in and covering my manager who's away on maternity leave, she still says that she'll get me fired if I disobey her, forcing me to go to extreme lengths just to get revenge and get her removed. And I've honestly never felt better about any situation at work in my life, because this lady got kicked out of my department faster than she had time to try and get back at me. Here's how I did it. Okay, so I used to work in an office in a trading department. The manager was super chill and she didn't really care much about my schedule and hours that I was doing, just as long as I did the hours my contract said and I didn't really mess around. I used to come in at around 7:30 in the morning every single day. I didn't start work until about 8 o'clock, but I would come in, say hello to a few people, make myself a cup of tea, maybe have a quick chat with someone, and then I would start working at 7:50 in the morning, which is still, by the way, 10 minutes before my start time. Now, I should finish my work by about 4:30 in the afternoon, but quite often I would stay until about 4:45 or sometimes go home at 4 o'clock. But the following day I would stay longer, so my hours in a working week would still add to what they're supposed to be. Well, my awesome manager went on maternity leave, and they gave us some jerk wannabe manager who hadn't had a clue about us or what we did at our job. And because my manager was away, we all had to report to this jerk pretty much every day. And trust me, she hated us. For some weird reason, she hated our department and everybody in it, even though she never said why. Well, very quickly she realized I was doing weird hours and pulled me into the office. She started saying all this crap on how I'm stealing company's time and money, how I'm unprofessional, and how she's gonna put her foot down and make me work properly. You know, whatever that means. Now, I tried to listen to her and asked her questions, but she started to say one more word and you are out. And it's like, oh, okay, you're a massive jerk, but great. So I ask, okay, what is it that you want me to do? She then says, do the hours that are stated in your contract. So I think to myself, okay, cool, whatever. So to clarify, I ask her, okay, does that mean that I have to start at 8 o'clock in the morning and finish at 4:30 every single day? And when I said this, she rolled her eyes. She looked at me like I'm stupid and says, it's not that hard. Your contracted hours is what I want to see in your timesheet, not this nonsense that you've been doing. And it's right about here that my master plan started to come to life. I thought to myself, okay, fine. You see, I'm petty, and I mean like really petty. And best of all, I do not like jerks. So I go home and I sleep like a baby, knowing that I will mess her up so much that she will start losing her mind. The next day I come to work and I wait by the clock-in machine to clock in right at 8 o'clock in the morning. Then I work my normal day and then I go back to the clock-in machine and I wait to clock out exactly at 4:30 in the afternoon. And I think at this point you can probably already guess where this is going. But wait, because trust me, there's so much more. My super friendly fellow coworkers realized very quickly what I was doing, and you know what? They decided to do the exact same thing. There were 10 of us in a team and we all gathered at the clock machine before and after the shift so that we could clock in and out exactly at 8 o'clock and at 4:30 in the afternoon. Now, the jerk manager didn't realize for a while what was going on. That is, until she put a meeting in place at 4 o'clock. Well, there were 4 of us in that meeting, but once 4:25 came around, all 4 of us get up while she's talking and run out to our desks. We then quickly gather our stuff and run to the clock-in machine, and then about 1 to 2 minutes later, we all clock out and go home. I mean, she didn't even have the time to ask us what we're doing. The next day, she sends us an invite for 4:30 p.m., and it gets rejected by everyone on the team. She then sends nasty emails to all of us who rejected her that we will be written up for insubordination. But you know what? We forwarded the email to Human Resources and we asked for a meeting. The meeting happens, the Human Resources lady listens to us with her eyes wide and laughing, and then she shakes her head and says, okay, just leave it to me. We then go about our day and then we all clock out exactly at 4:30 p.m. And wouldn't you guess it, the next day the jerk manager is nowhere to be seen. The Human Resources lady sent an email to us asking to come see her at 2 o'clock p.m. And it's right there that we're informed that the jerk manager will no longer oversee our department. And in all actuality, she will no longer work for the company, all due to her objectives not aligning more with the business. You know, whatever that means. Now, the gossip has it that this jerk manager was always biting more than she could chew and caused issues across a few departments. And she was apparently moved around because of second chances. But thankfully, we all went back to our own schedules. And when our manager came back from maternity leave and was told what happened, she just laughed and said that she raised us well because she would have done the exact same thing. Oh man, I love this so much because holy crap, I hate managers who act like this dude. Seriously, they come in here and they ruin the culture of your department. Everybody's happy, you have an original leader who literally gets it, and then in comes this moron who's like, oh, we're gonna shake things up. You're stealing company time and you need to do what I say or you're out of here. And it's like, dude, why are you making things so hostile? I'm still doing my job, I'm not stealing time. Like literally, my time at the end of the week is gonna be the exact same. Why would you choose to make things everything's weird like that. Like, come on. But also, I love the fact that they walked out in the middle of that meeting. Like, holy crap, that takes some guts, man. That's one of those things where, like, yeah, strength in numbers is exactly what you need because this is some crazy crap. If one of you had walked out and the rest stood still, that would have made that one person look bad. But because all of you walked out at the same time, like, that is beautiful in my opinion. So yeah, I love this story because this manager absolutely deserved to get shut down, especially if she's gonna be this hostile. If you like Am I the Jerk, you're probably going to love Am I the Genius. Check it out, link down below in the description. Also, go to amithejerk.com/submit if you would like to submit your own stories. Am I the jerk for not changing my daughter's wedding venue, even though my sister's husband proposed to his 22-year-old mistress there last month? Because right now, my sister is saying that I'm betraying the family if we go through with keeping this venue. And at this point, I honestly just don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. So I want to start off by saying that I put down a $20,000 non-refundable deposit on this gorgeous beachfront estate for my daughter. Let's call her Amy for the sake of the story, and her wedding is next September. And mind you, we booked it 18 months out. Now, without revealing too much, this is the venue in our area, and it's been Amy's dream wedding spot in all of her Pinterest boards. Well, last month, my sister, let's call her Carol, found out her cheating ex-husband, we'll call him Mark, proposed to his coworker who was 28, who he had been having an affair with since she was 22 years old. And this is where things get really tricky because the woman posted engagement photos from the same venue, specifically the beautiful beach area where Amy plans to have her ceremony. Well, as you can probably guess, Carol is absolutely destroyed. She called me sobbing, begging me to change venues. She says she can't watch Amy get married where Mark proposed to a girl younger than his own daughter. She cannot smile for photos on that beach. Now, I feel sick for her, I really do, but there are some massive issues with this plan. For starters, I put down a $20,000 non-refundable deposit. The save the dates are already sent, not to mention Amy's dreamed of this venue since she was in high school, and everything else is booked for like 3 times the price. I told Carol I can't lose $20,000 and crush Amy's dreams, all because Mark is a trash person. Carol then says I'm choosing money over her mental health, that I'm forcing her to relive the worst betrayal of her life for pretty pictures. I also talked to Amy about it, and she does not want a venue change. And you know what? It's not her fault that Mark, who has been out of our lives for like the past 5 years, ruined that place for Carol. And this is where Carol called Amy a spoiled brat who wouldn't understand real pain. And now, as a result, Carol is skipping Thanksgiving. In fact, my side and Carol's side of the family, namely her daughters and to some extent my parents, say that I'm being heartless. They say the place is cursed anyway, so why should we host Amy's big day there? But my husband's side of the family says that Carol doesn't get to hijack Amy's wedding just because her husband's a cheater. So seriously, am I the jerk for not switching venues? Because right now, I really just don't know what to do. Oh my gosh, there is no way you would ever be the jerk here. Carol is out of her mind, and so is her entire family. I seriously don't care what kind of emotional turmoil you've gone through. If I spent $20,000 that I will never get back just to book a venue for weddings and engagements, then guess what? I'm gonna keep that venue. Like, this is ridiculous. Why should you be expected to bend to whatever Carol's feeling that day? Because you've got it right. Just because Mark's a cheating jerk doesn't mean that somehow this is Amy's problem. And guess what? That venue is used by all kinds of people, both good and bad, all the time. Why should you be expected to flush $20,000 down the drain just because Carol got her feelings hurt? And also, someone pointed this out in the comments section, but Carol has literally had 5 years to figure this out. She has had so much time to heal those wounds and try to find some kind of like, oh, I don't know, I'm letting go of the past or whatever. Like, why on earth would she try to like force that on you and your daughter out of nowhere? All because he proposed at the same venue. Like, what's going on, dude? This is unacceptable in my opinion, and I just can't believe anyone would expect this from you. Because yeah, if I was in your shoes, I absolutely would prioritize my wallet over Carol's feelings. So with that in mind, no, you're definitely not the jerk. Because if Carol really felt this way, she and the rest of the family who's complaining, oh yeah, your daughter's a spoiled brat. Also, you're heartless and you're thinking about money instead of my feelings. Like, if they really think that's not a big deal and like, oh yeah, it's just $20,000, then all of them can help get your money back by paying you $20,000, but also start the process of reserving something else. Because I guarantee you they're never gonna do that, which in my opinion makes them hypocrites. Because the way that Carol's trying to put her feelings and her problems onto you and your daughter is just insane in my opinion. And I would not put up with that for a single second. Today, I need to confess because I've been lying to my entire family about why I'm doing way better suddenly financially. Because right now I feel terrible about it and I don't know if I should tell them the truth. Here's what's going on. Okay, so basically, my financial situation has improved pretty dramatically over the last 6 months, and I'm talking in a way that literally has allowed me to finally pay off my credit cards and started going out to decent restaurants instead of living off of literally pennies. Now, obviously, my family noticed, especially my mom. She keeps making comments about how I seem to be doing well for myself lately, and my dad asked if I got promoted at work. My younger sister straight up asked me how I suddenly have money for concert tickets and new clothing when I was literally broke 6 months ago. But the real reason is kind of embarrassing, and I know they'd lose their minds. I got into some online entertainment stuff and it hit really lucky on a few different platforms. Just some small amounts that happened to pay off way better than I ever expected. But instead of explaining that, I've been telling everyone I got a promotion and a raise at work. But here's the thing, my job is exactly the same, I have the same salary, literally just the same everything in my life. I just got lucky with timing and made some good calls on entertainment investments that were honestly more luck than skill. But here's the problem, my family, especially my mother, are super conservative about money. Like, she still lectures me about risky financial behavior when I buy name brand cereal instead of generic. If she knew I'd been putting money into what she definitely would consider gambling, she would absolutely lose it. Hours of lecture about how I'm throwing my money away and developing dangerous habits. My dad would probably be more chill about it, but he'd want to know all the details and give me advice about investment strategies, when really it was just me getting lucky on some entertainment bets, and not like I discovered some brilliant system. And my sister would definitely tell mom everything, because she can't keep her mouth shut about anything. The worst part is the lie keeps getting bigger. My mom wants to celebrate my promotion and take me out to dinner. My dad is giving me advice about 401k contributions based on my imaginary raise. I feel like such a fraud, but I'm also terrified of disappointing them or dealing with the judgment of them knowing the truth. So, has anyone ever had to hide good news because you knew it would cause more problems than just keeping quiet? Because right now I feel so stuck that I just don't know what to do. Okay, I've said this 1,000 times on the channel, but I really mean this. If you win the lottery or win like a lot of money because you invested in the right things, or you made the right bets or something like that, the best thing you can do is say nothing to anybody. But especially don't give off any hints that, yeah, I'm doing pretty good now. Like, I'm sorry, but you kind of dug this hole for yourself, and I don't really feel bad for you because this really could have been avoided. If I was in the original poster's shoes and I had what was basically like life-changing money, I would just make subtle changes in my life, but there's no way in the world I would make these big steps like this guy did. Like, seriously, you had to know that your family was gonna catch on, right? Like, why not just keep this under wraps instead of confessing everything? Because I really think people change once money's involved in the equation. Family, friends, it doesn't matter who it is. The second they know that you're loaded, they're gonna be like, oh, can I have some of that? Because suddenly that money you earned is gonna become everybody's money. Everybody's gonna want a piece of that pie until you're left with nothing left. And if your family really is as obnoxious as you're saying, then my God, you've really got yourself in a bad situation. So if I was in your shoes, I would say nothing. I would not add on to this lie, and I would be like, no, I don't want to celebrate. It's honestly nobody's business. Because here's my conspiracy theory. You ready for this? This could be wrong, so bear with me. But in my opinion, based on the way they're acting, it almost seems like your parents are trying to butter you up and get more information from you, so they can then like step forward and be like, oh, so that's how much money you made, and then try to start asking you for favors. Like, it literally seems like the beginning stage of what I just described, and that is kind of alarming in my opinion. So no, I would not say anything, and I would just take this as a lesson learned, because you can still right this ship in the right direction. Because if you're not careful, everybody's gonna know you're rich, and that's only gonna cause you more problems than any kind of good. I overheard my neighbor saying that he hates me and my wife, stating that we're being annoying with the cameras we have around our house, despite the fact that we've been very accommodating while they're trying to build a pool in their backyard. And now I'm considering confronting them about this because my feelings are really hurt and I seriously just don't know what to do. Here's what's going on. Okay, I want to start off by saying that I am baffled by a recent encounter with my neighbor, and this is primarily about what I overheard. I live in the United States suburb and it's summer. I replaced my AC system in March, which was a significant investment for us. Well, our new neighbors who've been here for 6 months informed us in May that they are putting in a pool, and this was our first encounter with them. The pool company asked to use the path between our houses and gave us a poorly written liability waiver with inconsistent references. I then saw this as an opportunity to be a good neighbor and reword it to be more clear and sent it back, which they appreciated. A few days later, the neighbor wife asked to meet in person to discuss the timeline and their concerns. My wife then mentioned our new AC unit and asked that the machinery avoid the condenser. We also requested their work vehicles not park in front of our house, which we really need as we have regular services that use that space. We have an old Google camera that I use for video feed of the AC unit, just in case anything happened. I put this in a window in a conspicuous location so everyone knew it was there. Well, over the summer, nothing happened and we had no contact. So last week, my wife asked about repairs to our grass and sprinklers, and the neighbor's wife said the project was delayed but should be finished in a few weeks. And just as a side note, all of these interactions were very polite messages. Well, this brings us to our most recent encounter a day ago. At around 5 o'clock in the evening, a work vehicle with a trailer arrives and parks directly in front of our driveway. The workers open the trailer and start doing their work. The truck is labeled for a specific service, and another crew had been on site recently to perform the same service. I was mildly curious as I didn't really think it was the same company, and so as my wife and I head out to take our evening walk with our dog, my wife asks how long they will be there, and they respond that they are about to leave. Now, the interaction was no more than 5 seconds. As we arrive home, they are leaving and the neighbor's heading inside of his house. Now, I need to also mention that we have a driveway camera. I was curious if I could listen to their conversation and hear why another company was here, and yeah, this is just me being nosy. But what I hear is not that. It's my neighbors complaining about us to these workers. He then talks bad about us and mentions the camera, and I can also tell that they discuss the parking situation. This guy then said that he just doesn't like us repeatedly, and I can clearly hear him say, "Man, I do not like these new neighbors, both of them." Now, my wife and I debated this for a bit because I don't know what he means by that, but we finally came to a conclusion that he means us and his other neighbors. And honestly, I'm taken aback. We have barely spoken to each other. My wife has had maybe 5 back and forth text conversations and maybe 1 in-person conversation, if that. We've never spoken to him personally. My daughter says that she has talked to him maybe once and it was just like a passing hello. I'm honestly not sure what to do here. As I see it, we've done nothing to him. There's never been a personal interaction. So seriously, am I the jerk here? My wife is considering confronting the neighbor's wife, but I'm honestly not sure if this is the right choice. What should we do? Okay, in my opinion, it doesn't sound like you've really done anything wrong. And you know what? If they got problems with your camera, then tough cookies. Because if you're pointing it at your brand new AC unit to make sure nobody's messing with it, then guess what? That's well within your rights. But in my opinion, there's no way you should ever approach them about what they said about you. Like honestly, this is one of those situations where you need to let it go and just move on. You now know that they are pieces of garbage and you absolutely want nothing to do with them. Because clearly, they would make some kind of weird judgment call about you, even though from the sounds of it, you've been really accommodating and reasonable, and better yet, you've never really had any other interactions with them. Like it really just seems like you have some toxic neighbors and that really sucks, so I really am sorry about that. So no, in my opinion, do not approach them about this. Any kind of interaction about this by being like, "Oh yeah, I overheard your conversation through my camera." Like that's only going to cause more problems in my opinion, and I just don't think it's worth it. My idiotic nephew broke my headphones, and despite the fact that I talked with his mother to try and get some kind of replacement going, she's claiming that this is not her problem, which is now putting me in a situation where I kind of want to sell my nephew's stuff just so I can get some money to replace my headphones. And at this point, I don't know if I would be the jerk if I did this because right now I'm incredibly pissed off. Here's what's going on. I'm a 21-year-old female and I just got off of an 8-hour shift at work. I work in hospitality, so I was dealing with people all day. I hadn't gotten the opportunity to eat my lunch on the job, so I figured I would warm up what I did not get to eat in the microwave at home. Well, my 12-year-old nephew was home unbeknownst to me. As we are usually on good terms, I spoke to him a little while I was preparing to reheat my food. And this is where he starts to get playful and start to roughhouse with me for my food, despite the fact that we are around the same height and probably the same weight. I mean, he's maybe like an inch or two beneath me, but if it's helpful in any context, he plays football and he is quite heavy. After I shove him off of me to get my food, he then grabs me by my collar and shoves me back against the countertop and combos it by slamming the right side of my head into the microwave my food was in. Now, since the microwave is floating, as in bolted to the cabinets above the counter, my headphones, which were on my head at the time, took the shock of the impact instead of my face and they broke immediately. Now, I didn't get hurt, that's not what this is about, but instead the right ear of my headphones were left dangling. I wasn't upset right away, but more so just in shock because of what happened. I didn't even take it up with him first since my sister was about to be home soon. Well, when she arrived later that evening, I informed her of what her son had done to me, and as expected, she just brushed it off. In her words, she said, "Well, that's not my problem," and it's right here that I knew that if she wouldn't handle it, I would have to call the father instead. Now, my sister, I'll call her Nikki for clarity, actually prevented me from contacting the father as well, and her reasoning was that she didn't want to waste his time with this. When I suggested selling off some of her stuff to make up for what her son did, she got visibly irritated. Now, I only suggested that since I assumed that she didn't have the money to replace the headphones herself. I also went ahead and I tried to have our mother weigh in on the situation, and she suggested that I sell the son's items instead since he was directly responsible. Well, it's now been a month since this all went down, and I'm officially fed up with my problems being put on the back burner. So would I be the jerk if I sold off my nephew's stuff just to get my money back for the headphones? Because right now I'm not sure what else to do. Oh man, I cannot stand siblings like this where they're like, no, my kid has done nothing wrong and you're not going to contact anyone else about this. This is not my problem. It's like, dude, no, it is your problem. Your stupid kid slammed my head against the microwave and now guess what? My headphones are literally broken. Like you owe me a new pair of headphones. Like that's crazy to me. I can't believe she's acting like that. So while I can't really say whether or not you should sell this stuff off to get the money, in my opinion, your sister and nephew are 100% responsible for your headphones breaking. And the fact that they're trying to say otherwise is absolutely insane in my opinion.
PTA mom threatens to take away my graduation because I can't serve them 300 pieces of chicken. Ended up ruining their daughter's college dreams instead. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell for notifications. So this transpired a few years back when I was 18. The revenge technically was not done by me, but I am a key witness in the events that occurred. For some context, I used to work at a big chain store in the deli department. Wasn't a great job, but it was my first one and it helped pay for college, so I endured it. But because of what I was subjected to, I quit shortly after, despite it having a great end result. In my hometown, population of 4,500, there was this small group of PTA moms who were pretty high up on the chain of command, but also led their own company for party planning. They're known mostly for the fact that their daughters are all best friends and are straight A 4.0 students, and all three were supposed to be valedictorians. I knew them mostly because they were the we hate drama crowd, but always spread drama about people. Unfortunately, it had happened to me at one point and put me into some pretty deep depression, but that's for another story. Not just that, but all three daughters were accepted to Ivy League schools on a full-ride scholarship. The one fault they had, besides the drama, was that they were really arrogant, prideful people, both the daughters and the mothers, and were incredibly rude to anyone who wasn't rich, white, or even super in shape. At the time, I was pretty overweight and had a bad acne problem. This will come into play later. Well, one day, they come in asking for 300 pieces of fried chicken and 200 pinwheel sandwiches. For anyone who's ever worked in any capacity of retail or food, you know that for an order that big, we need at least a couple days notice to order more inventory and actually cook everything on time. Not to mention, I was the only one left working for the night, so their order would have been impossible anyway. Well, these ladies thought they could pick it up on the spot to ensure food quality. I told them that they would need to fill out an order form and that it would be a couple of days, and they flipped their lid. I'm not talking a small sigh in disbelief. I'm talking vague threats to actually have me not walk during graduation. Here's how the talk basically went. I need this food today. We're the party planners of the lake party you probably didn't get invited to, and the party's in 2 hours. I'm sorry, but we literally don't have the staff or the time for that right now. I'm more than happy to make you a 96 piece, but it'll take about an hour. Do you think that's funny? Do you know who I am? No, I don't. Yeah, we're the official party planners of hometown. We also run the high school PTA. So our daughters probably know you. You don't want your image tarnished, do you? I brushed off the vague threat of using her daughter. That's actually pretty cool. Sounds like a cool job, but there's no way for 300 pieces and 200 pinwheels to be done in the amount of time you want. I apologize for any inconvenience it makes for you. If you want, I'm more than happy to get a manager so they can talk to you. When your manager gets here, I'm gonna have you fired and kicked out of walking this year. We don't want any fatties taking up the walkway anyway. I don't know how they knew I was a senior. Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to tolerate that kind of threat, and I'm going to have to ask you to leave now. But we didn't get our food yet. I'm sorry, but like I stated before, it would not be possible to complete that task. And with the way I was just treated, I have the right to refuse service to you anyway. Have a good day. You'll be hearing from us, you fat jerk. I hope our daughters don't know anything dirty about you. It's at this point that the manager walks out. Excuse me, ladies, but you have no reason to treat my staff like that. You may think you run this town, but but that does not give you any rein to treat someone like that. The three PTA moms walk away with a big FU on the way out. A few days go by and I haven't heard anything from either them or my manager. Then one day at class, I see the daughters in a corner crying with each other. I got a word from one of their friends who was somewhat close to me that in the past 2 days, they were told they could no longer walk at graduation due to being caught for cheating on basically every assignment and were no longer attending any Ivy League schools. At first, I thought this was just a coincidence to what had occurred the week prior, but apparently what happened was that a bystander overheard the heated exchange, and this bystander also happened to be a former member of the PTA, so she also had a lot of dirt on the mothers and their children. Apparently this was her breaking point, as she was skeptical to come forward prior about many things, due to scrutiny. It turns out the mothers were basically getting the answers to every assignment by either paying off teachers, using vague threats against their family, or just straight up saying that they would sleep with them. Because our school was smaller, there were only a handful of teachers that needed to be pleased and threatened. This was my moment of happiness. Not only did those women get kicked out of the PTA, but their daughters, who I mentioned used to be my old bullies, were dropped from ever attending the school of their dreams. Last I heard, the daughters stayed in the hometown, and now work in the same deli department I used to work in. I mean, talk about karma. Our original poster literally didn't do anything here. Someone else just happened to witness them dealing with these horrible people and decided to take things into their own hands. That is an issue with small towns though, where people can get swollen heads about what kind of power they actually have. Me, living in a big city, if some lady's getting in my face saying she's a member of the PTA, good for you. I don't care. I don't really see what kind of power you hold with something like that. Just because you have this position doesn't mean you get to treat people like crap. All you're doing is going around making a lot of enemies out of people that just don't like you. Anything that comes your way afterwards is deserved as far as I'm concerned. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and don't forget to subscribe. Karen wants me to load her car and put her cart back at the grocery store. I don't work here, lady. A couple of years ago, I stopped at Lowe's to exchange my empty propane tank. I had just finished securing the new one in my trunk when I heard a shout from across the parking lot. Excuse me, can you help? I looked up and saw a middle-aged woman having trouble getting a microwave that she just bought into her trunk. No problem. I went over and helped her. The microwave wasn't too heavy and it fit perfectly into her car. She thanked me, I nodded, and I started to walk away. I was a few feet from her car when I heard her say, "Aren't you going to take my cart back up there?" I turned around and saw her pointing at her shopping cart. "Take my cart," she demanded, starting to get a little agitated. "Oh, you know I don't work here, right?" "Yes, I know, but you should still be a gentleman and take my cart." "No, I was helping you out with the microwave, but I'm not about to—" "Take my cart, now!" she yelled, pointing to the store. Okay, whatever. I didn't want to get into an argument in the middle of the Lowe's parking lot, so I sighed, walked back to her, and took her cart. I started to bring it back towards the store, but this didn't quite sit right with me. I was okay helping her with the microwave, but she was certainly capable of doing this part of the job. If people always do this kind of thing for her, she'll never learn her lesson. I was about 10 feet away from her when I decided to stop pushing the cart back and wait for her to get into the car. As soon as she had her door shut, I turned around, walked back to her parking spot, and left that shopping cart right behind her car, so she couldn't even leave without getting out and moving it herself. I hope that jerk is having the best of luck with her microwave. You give an inch, they take a mile, am I right? I gotta say, the way our original poster did this, I probably would have handled it the exact same way every step of the process. I see you struggling. Sure, no problem. I'll give you a hand. You're gonna be rude and ask me to put your cart back? Whatever, fine. You're not worth arguing with. Then, literally as I was reading it, I had the same idea of just leaving the cart behind her car. She has no choice but to deal with it. Someone helping you out of the goodness of their heart is a good thing. You demanding that people do stuff for you is just rude on the other hand. Karen refuses to leave a tip, saying she doesn't tip high school dropouts. So I used to barista at a small cafe 5 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's a great job with great hours for my college schedule, and the customers are generally fantastic. In fact, in the 8 months or so I've been on the job, I've only dealt with a small handful of rude customers. This lady from about 2 weeks ago was one of those people, and her comment still baffles me today. Before I continue, I must explain how our POS system works. We use something called Square, which uses the iPad for processing credit and debit cards. It's really neat and comes with a lot of features, like the guilt the customer into tipping tool that forces non-tippers to select no tip before they can sign their names on another screen to authorize the sale. Most people don't mind this and think it's neat and it really boosts our tips, except Clueless. Clueless thinks she's being forced to tip, not noticing the no tip option, and proceeds to yell at me and berate me. This was the brief conversation with her. What the heck is this? I have to leave a tip for some high school dropout? Cancel the order. Cancel everything. I'm never coming here again. This is extortion. Ma'am, there's an option below the dollar amounts you see that allows you to process the transaction without appending a tip. Here, I proceed to help her find it. Oh, I see now. You're trying to make me feel like a bad person. Well, it hasn't worked, Missy. I don't believe in tipping high school dropouts who refuse to get some education and a real job. I haven't tipped anyone in at least 10 years. Okay, did you still want to cancel the order? Absolutely, and give me back my credit card. She leaves in a rage. I wish her a good day, and she tells me she's gonna be having a bad one just to spite me. What? I hate jerks. Okay, so for one, we've had the conversation before about the whole tipping thing. Personally, I don't think tipping should be a thing. I think your employer should pay you a living wage to begin with, and not expect half of it to come from the generosity of customers. Our original poster herself referred to it as guilting the customer into tipping, which just never feels good on the customer's end. We don't want to feel like we're leaving you hurting and we're the jerks because your boss doesn't pay you enough. That being said, this lady's reaction was over the top. If you don't want to leave a tip, then that's fine. If you don't want your order, then that's fine. You don't need to insult the person behind the counter. You give her a hard time because you think you're better than her, but you're the one that's acting pretty low. Entitled mother wants to see the manager because my coworker doesn't speak English. First off, he is the manager. Second, you're in Norway. So I worked as a cinema technician for a few years, and I've had my run-in with entitled parents. Corona has given me ample time to reflect on those meetings, and here's one of them. So in the summer, my country gets quite a lot of tourists, and especially American ones. They're often visiting to see where their family comes from and that sort of stuff, and they're generally nice. Most of them. Not this Karen. She was different. She, her husband, and their entitled kid came into the cinema in the middle of the day. There were very few people, since we Norwegians like to get our sun whenever it pops up. Normally, when Americans come into the kiosk to buy something, they ask, "So, you speak English?" And I say I do, and we continue the transaction in English. Fair enough. I sort of reacted when Karen didn't ask me if I spoke English, but I do, so no harm done. She wants to see a children's movie because of entitled kid. I said that all of them were dubbed. After explaining to a now slightly irritated Karen what dubbing means, she becomes a little angry. I told her that another movie was starting in about an hour and that movie was in English and her kid could get in with her. She complained a little more and it ended with her slamming some money on the register and demanding a free popcorn goblet for their time that I wasted, which she didn't get. After about an hour, I hear screaming coming from the entrance to the auditorium. I of course run to see what's up, and I see Karen really yelling at my coworker. Now, my coworker at the time was a very old man, a very old Norwegian man. Fun fact about Norway, most of us speak English, but a lot of the older people here don't. I say to my coworker in Norwegian, "What's wrong? Can she find the auditorium?" My coworker responds that they don't know, and they think that she's asking them for something and they tried to explain that they don't speak English. "Excuse me, this man refused
refuses to accommodate us.
How so?
He refuses to speak English.
He doesn't speak English. He speaks Norwegian.
How can he not speak English? This is terrible customer service, and he's scaring my child.
I'm sorry, but you're in Norway, and a part of the population doesn't…
I demand to speak to your manager.
I'm sorry, but that won't be possible.
Why not?
Because he is the manager, I say, gesturing to my older coworker. She insisted that I call an actual manager, but my coworker was the only manager available, so that wouldn't be possible anyway. She and Entitled's kid went in to see their movie. After the movie, they came to the kiosk and demanded a refund because the subtitles were in the way. They, of course, didn't get it. She was easily my weirdest, rudest American jerk. I don't really know what to say to this one. If you're going to another country, you need to accept the fact that not everyone is going to speak English. In fact, odds are most people aren't going to speak English. I don't know if this was her first hour in the country or something like that, but apparently she wasn't aware of this. I feel like you're setting the expectations a little high when you think that an entire country is going to speak your native language. And of course, we have to wrap this off with the classic Karen move of demanding a refund after the fact. I'm sorry, no, that's not gonna happen. The Christmas present that I got for my mom that I believed to be a back massager turned out to be something else. So I do Secret Santa with my family every year. This year I got my mom. We wrote down things we wanted on our lists and my mom had put down a back massager. It's basically like a deep tissue thing that's in the shape of a gun. I found one on Amazon and I was so happy because it was cheap. So I placed an order and this is where I think I screwed up. I didn't open the box it came with, just wrapped it. So today, since me and my family are impatient, we opened our gifts. My mom opens hers and sees the Amazon box. She opens the box and sitting in it is a adult toy. She looks at me and we all bust out laughing. My sisters and dad kept making jokes while I sat there in shock. I explained myself and they understood, and I got a refund because that's definitely not what I ordered. No one's mad, but I'm so embarrassed. I mean, hey, at least everyone understood that it was just a simple mistake. I don't think anyone out here is actually thinking you're trying to get that for your mom. That would be more than a little bit weird. What I am surprised about is the fact that that still falls under Amazon's return policy. I really hope they don't take it back after it's been opened. My cab driver got in an accident while I was in the car and still wanted to charge me for the trip. I was on a business trip to a client in Philly, located just far enough away from the city to be a very expensive cab ride, but not so far as to warrant a rental car. I flew down, got an airport cab there, was there for a week being picked up and delivered from my hotel by taxi, and on Friday, the client called a cab for me to return to the airport. The driver of my cab was distracted and not driving with safe attention to the road. So after a couple miles, he hit another car. Fortunately, it was a low-speed collision, just barely not fast enough to deploy the airbags, and everyone walked away unharmed. However, I had to wait for the cops to show up to give a statement, and I insisted the cab company send another car with another driver to take me to the airport. A couple minutes into waiting, I realized the driver had left the meter running, which I insisted he stop. All told, I was there maybe an hour between waiting for the cop, talking to the cop, convincing the cop not to force me to go to the hospital. I had a black eye before the accident and the cop was really worried that I was terribly injured and too delusional to realize I'd been hurt, and waiting for a new cab to show up. So while I'd left early for my flight, by the time I got to the airport, I was going to have to rush to make it. You'd think if you had a cab company and your driver had a car accident with the passenger in the car, you'd see to it that they got to their destination safely and hope they don't sue you. But not only did the second cabbie run the meter and ask me to pay, he told me the owner of the cab company had insisted he get the fare from the first cab's meter and insist I pay that too. I told him calmly that I recognized that the law allowed that I could be charged for the trip, although good business practice would dictate otherwise, and that if I hadn't been charged, he would have gotten a good tip, while now he'd be getting no tip, as I was offended. I then told him to tell his boss what I was going to do. You see, my client there was a major bank. bank. It wasn't Bank of America, but a few years later it got bought by Bank of America, so you can think of it as being that size. They had people in to consult with them and work with them often, and they always used this cab company for all the local travel. I would be going back there in 2 weeks, so I simply phoned up my clients on Monday morning to let them know about the accident, and asked them very nicely to please find another cab company for me to use when I would be there. My contact at the client was, of course, horrified, and made sure that they, their employees, and their consultants and contractors would never be using that cab company again. I hope the few bucks was worth it, jerk. Our original poster summed this up perfectly with that one sentence. They acknowledged that they could legally be charged for that, but good businesses wouldn't do that. You've proven the level of your scumminess by following through. If you're at a restaurant and you find a hair in your food, the restaurant will typically comp the meal, right? This is an extreme equivalent of that. You are responsible for getting me from one place to another, and to do so safely. That didn't happen. Sure, I get it. Things happen. Accidents are called accidents for a reason. However, like the poster said, if you're trying to do right by your client and want their continued business in the future, you're not going to charge them for that ride. You, as a company, take the write-off. It sucks, but you gotta do right by your customer in that situation. You made this really gray area decision for a few bucks and ended up losing a whole lot of business as a result. That's a perfect example of the consequences of behaving like that. Entitled sister demands we share my daughter. Claims that she has parental rights. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell for notifications. Okay, so this happened a few years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday, and to be honest, still can't understand what my sister was thinking. A little backstory. My sister and I had to share everything as kids. Not to mention I was forced to be her and our younger brother's second mother, but I'll save that for a different post. For some of my childhood, I was happy to share things with my sister. Sweets, snacks, toys, the normal kid things. There's 4 years between us. I'm the oldest, and as you can probably guess, when I reached my teen years, I wanted my own things and to spend some time alone. Nope. She wanted me to do everything with her. I could barely spend 10 minutes in the bathroom before she would start banging on the door. Unfortunately, when I was around 15, my siblings and I were taken into foster care. We were separated from our brother, which was difficult for both of us, and for a while I didn't mind my sister wanting to spend all her time with me. Shortly after my 16th birthday, I wanted to have my own space, and things that are, well, mine. She would argue with me over not sharing my stuff. And of course, typical sibling fights and yelling happened almost every other day. We sort of grew out of our sibling squabbles over the years, but she kinda developed a "the world owes me" attitude, which drove me crazy. I did my best to hold in my frustrations, but I'm human, and I sometimes kinda snapped. A couple years after my daughter was born, my sister and I weren't really talking much because of her selfish attitude towards me spending most of my time and income on my daughter. During one of the times we were on good terms, she was over for the weekend, and everything was okay. Until a conversation led to her telling me she was going to take my daughter for a week because she wanted to spend time with her, saying that it was her turn. I said, not gonna happen. She's my daughter, not a doll or a pet we share. She gets mad and starts yelling. I told her to leave, and she argues about how she had parental rights, and that social services will force me to allow her to take my daughter whenever she wants. I laughed, told her to get out and don't come back. Honestly, I don't know if she seriously thought that it was her right to have my daughter. I've got plenty of other insane stories about my family, which I may post at some point. Your sister sounds a little bit delusional. Everything up until this point, especially with you guys being taken out of your parents' care and put into foster care, I kinda summed up to her just wanting to be around her big sister. But thinking that she's entitled to her turn with your child and that social services is gonna back her on this, she might have a screw loose. Like I said, everything else up until this point is totally understandable. If she doesn't see that there's a line here though, then yeah, maybe she should talk to somebody. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below. And don't forget to subscribe. Entitled dad insists that a stranger pay for his shopping, claiming that he promised he would do so. Due to me working in a supermarket, I meet a lot of different people, and most of them are incredibly nice and respectful. However, I also see a lot of Karens and male Karens, and that's exactly who this story is about. It was midweek and I was working the tills when a man, entitled dad, and his son approached and began loading on their shopping, and they had a lot of shopping. After scanning their items, I told them the amount. I think it was around 145 pounds. And the entitled dad began rummaging around in his wallet and pulling out notes of money. After counting it all out, it turns out he was a few pounds short and decided his son should probably put something back so that he could pay. The kid was upset and reluctantly obliged. However, the guy who was standing behind them at the till spoke up. "I can get that for you." He smiled, obviously talking to the kid and not the dad. The kid smiled, and before he could say anything, the entitled dad went, "Oh, thank you so much. Comes to X pounds." And he threw his son's items in the trolley and moved away to let the man come forwards. The other guy was like, "I was talking about your kid stuff. I'll buy that. I'm not paying for all of your shopping. I can't afford to." "But you just said you'd pay." "Yeah, but I meant I'd pay for your kid's thing, not all of your shopping." "Well, you can't just make empty promises. You have to pay for it now." He then looked at me. "That's how it works, right? He has to pay because he promised he would." I tell the entitled dad that this nice gentleman is not obligated to buy his shopping. Entitled dad shoots me a mean look and tells his son to pass his stuff to the man behind who was still nice enough to pay for it, which is a lot nicer than I would have been. They then both left. Midway through serving the nice guy, I saw entitled dad and his kid at the cash machine through the window withdrawing some more money, meaning all along he could afford it in the first place. So me and the nice guy had a good laugh about that. I gotta commend this guy for not letting some jerk get him down. Seriously though, shout out to this random stranger who was nice enough to offer and completely shook this jerk off when things went sideways. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people would be willing to fork up a few bucks to get the kid what he wants and just kinda keep the line moving. It's a nice gesture and you're helping someone out and making a kid happy. Not a big deal if you can afford it, but to turn around and assume they're gonna pay for your whole cart is a little bit much. It's quite clear they're just offering you the few bucks that you need. But it's when people like this get taken advantage of that they stop being so generous. Thankfully, this gentleman wasn't going to let it ruin his day. I kicked a jerk out of my car for smoking after I told him not to, so he tried to frame me. A bit of background. I'm from Germany. I have only a few rules concerning my home, my stuff, and my car when other people come around. In my home, it's I'm not a servant. If you want to eat or drink, take it from the fridge or pantry. With my tools, it's ask before using. And in my car, it is do not smoke in my car. And above all, if you make a mess, you clean it up. Seems reasonable, right? Well, not for the guy in this story. For our cast, we have me, the smoker, and the police officer. This happened in summer 2015. I got my car in December 2014, a 2008 Volkswagen Golf 1.9 diesel. I still drive it. I was on my way to a convention and decided to take a passenger with me. Really nice to have some company on a 6-hour drive. I picked him up and told him about the no smoking rule. Everything seemed fine until we hit the Autobahn. This guy pulled out a pack of cigarettes and lit one up. This following conversation ensued. "Hey, what the hell? I told you, no smoking."
So what? What you gonna do about it?
Kick you out?
You know, it's illegal to stop on the Autobahn.
This is true. German law states you can't stop on the Autobahn unless it's an emergency or your car broke down. You even get fined for running out of gas on the Autobahn, as it is preventable. Anyways, I knew something Smoker didn't. There was a truck stop just 3 kilometers ahead. I got off the Autobahn and stopped at said truck stop. Alright, out of my car, now.
You can't do that.
I sure as heck can. This is my car and I have every right to kick you out. The next part is a bit blurry as it was mainly screaming at each other. I remember getting out of my car and tossing his suitcase and bag out of my car, then dragging him out of my car and shoving him to the ground. I drove off and listened to music the rest of the drive, singing along to Rammstein. Later that evening, I was in the hotel room relaxing after the drive. I'd been there about 3 hours at that point when I heard a knock at the door. Hotel management, hotel security, convention organizer, and the police were all standing there with a smug-looking smoker. Police told me they picked him up about 2 kilometers away from the truck stop on the Autobahn. He claimed I kicked him out at the spot where they found him. "You do know this is illegal. You broke Highway Code XYZ and willingly endangered smoker's life." "Sir, with all due respect, he's been lying to you. I kicked him out at the truck stop. You can ring them up. I'm sure they have it on tape. Did he even tell you why I kicked him out?" "No, he didn't." I then told them the story and explained I didn't want him in my car anymore because he broke my personal rules in my personal car. I kicked him out at the truck stop, as from there he could have easily called someone to come and pick him up. Smoker turned very pale at that point. The police officer was furious with him. "Is this true?" "Well, you need to come with me." Smoker got charged with falsely accusing me. It was a money-related penalty, in the 4-figure range. Wasn't the first time, as I later found out. The convention canceled his membership. Hotel management canceled his reservation. And I got free drinks at the hotel bar for my entire stay, as well as a free sponsor upgrade for the convention. Thanks, jerk. Yeah, this is just a jerk being a classic jerk here. He knew the rule and waited until the moment where you couldn't do anything about it. The pettiness of calling the police and trying to frame you for breaking the law is just next level though. It's your car and your rules. You told him no smoking. That's the way it is. If he really needed one that badly, I'm sure he could have asked you to pull over. And hey, guess what? There was a truck stop right up ahead. But he just had to go and be a jerk about it. He even came with the "what are you gonna do about it" line. He did nothing but antagonize and escalate the situation. To turn around and try and pull a move like that when you handled the situation how he was asking for it to be handled is just really low. My boss refused to give me a raise, so I got my own license and now I'm his boss. Let's start with the background. I work as a subcontractor for an actually licensed contractor for a realty company. Basically, the realty company buys houses and the contractor tells us to go to the new address, and my coworkers and I flip the house and get it ready to be rented. When I first started the job, it was a difficult transition, considering I was a plumber previously, but eventually I became a valuable asset to contractor's company. Thus the realty company as well. The contractor was infamous for being a bit of a jerk when it came to actual business and money. He was constantly yelling and screaming at the plumber, the painters, etc. about prices and how it took them too long and he wasn't paying that much. Which I would understand if the yelling was actually warranted. When it became tax season, he gave everyone a 1099 and said he lost mine and got ticked off every time I asked about it. This guy easily makes $2 million a year, so he says. So I don't really think $100 off the price matters that much. Not enough to get into a screaming match and ruin relationships with other subcontractors. I've been working for him for about a year now at $16 an hour. Not too bad in my area. But he makes a lot more in a day than the $160 I make every 10-hour workday. One day, I asked him for a raise, which he laughs at and shuts me down immediately. After that, I decide to work harder, get houses done faster, and show him that I deserve a raise. A few months later, I decide to ask for a raise again, but not as directly. How could I be more useful to the company so I can increase my productivity and both of us can make more money? He said, "Get a van and a trailer and then we can talk about more money," in his normal gruff tone that says, "Shut up and get back to work." After that day, I worked side jobs here and there. Worked a lot later than I usually would, and even all throughout the weekend, saving up as much money as possible. I sometimes wouldn't eat some days just to save that little bit of money. He loved how much I was getting done, and I could practically see the dollar signs in his eyes when I told him all that I got done every day. Finally, the day came where I saved up just enough to buy my dad's old Ford van. Then, not long after, I bought a piece of crap 5x10 trailer that I had to fix up. The following Monday, I pull up with the bright bright white gas guzzler in the fixed-up trailer following behind. I walked up to him smiling ear to ear about my accomplishment, hoping he would be proud or at least happy of all that I've done. I tell him to look at my new toys, and all he says is, "Cool," and got in his truck and left. Okay, maybe he's just busy, I thought, as I processed his extremely underwhelming response. At the end of the day, I finally have a moment with him to discuss my raise. So I have the van and the trailer. I've saved up and done everything you said that I needed to do to make money and be more of an asset to this company. He narrows his eyes at me. "What are you talking about? You said that if I got a van and a trailer that you would pay me more." "I never said any of that. You have to actually work if you want something else from me." I was devastated. I've been working my butt off while he sat around and watched. I followed every instruction, completed at the very least 2 houses a week, which he makes about $5,000 per house, or so he says. And he acts like I do nothing for the company. I swallowed my pride and let out a quick "yes sir" and left his office. I was finally tired of dealing with him. Tired and defeated, I decided it was time to start looking for other jobs that actually have the possibility to move up. Then the company electrician gave me an idea. I'm gonna call him Adam for privacy reasons. Adam is a good guy all around. If you needed advice or just someone to talk to, he was always there for you. I told him about everything that had happened with Contractor and told him I was looking for other jobs. He simply said, "You're not supposed to be here to try and make it to the top. You're here to learn. Learn everything you can, and then one day you'll be the contractor. A better one than Contractor for sure. Why not look into getting your general contracting license? It's not hard, you just have to work for it." That's what I did to an extent. I worked with Contractor for years dealing with his bullcrap, until one day I decided to get my electrician's license. Now he doesn't decide what I'm paid. I do. That is, if he wants me to work for him, and if not, then I have other customers to make my living. I took his words to heart and came up with a plan. I did some research on becoming a general contractor in my state. Requirements differ in other states. Basically, I would need books to learn the material, references, a bank reference, and to pass the test. The books were pretty expensive. With bills, taking care of my family, and a monthly van payment, it seemed impossible for now. Until I found a group following in my area that needed a handyman to do a variety of things. Perfect. Extra money. Soon my name started blowing up in my small town. I did everything from repairing fences to installing toilets. I took everything I learned from plumbing and from working for Contractor and used it to build a reputation. References. Check. This is when I decided it was time to open my own business. Again, I did my research and learned all I had to do to open said business. I'll spare you the details, but it was basically business license, how to get an LLC, liability insurance, think of a name not already taken, blah blah blah. It took a while, but I sent in all that I had and prayed to whatever God there is for me to be invited to take the test. I waited about 3 weeks and finally I got a letter inviting me to take the next test. It was a 3-hour drive and on a Tuesday. Great, another speed bump. I have to miss a day's work and pay $300. The day of the test came and I panicked. It was open book, but I eventually ran out of time and didn't get to finish. I was so disappointed in myself that I basically gave up. I just decided to keep working my job and a little side business. A week later, I was holding my son. He's a beautiful, blonde-haired, blue-eyed reflection of myself. After I managed to get him to sleep, I stared at him and wondered if I could be able to give him a better life than I had. I remembered growing up in crappy trailers, being hungry, and made fun of at school because I wore clothes from Walmart. Not the best way to grow up, but I had a roof over my head. I always wanted video games that my friends had, but never got it. I wanted to go to trampoline parks and water parks. I had only been once in my entire life. That's about when my resolve renewed itself for me. I had to do this, not only for me, but for him. I saved up all over again and came up with the $300 and requested for a retake of the test. I took practice tests online, so I was ready. The day came and I barely managed to pass, but I still passed the test and received my license. Now, time for the fun part. With all of the time passing, I became pretty close friends with the owner of the realty company, going to barbecues, stopping to tell him some corny joke I saw on Facebook, and doing extra tasks not under contractor. One day, I came into his office and saw some invoices from contractor on his desk. I just said, wow, that's how much you're paying him? Dude, he should at least take it a little bit easy on you being that you've known each other so long. He just nodded and said, you think so? And he just looked at the papers more. Since then, I would say little comments about how much contractor was being paid and how many houses we could buy with that money. Just planting seeds in his mind that I slowly water until they turn into a beautiful garden of resentment. Finally, owner calls me and wants me to come to his house for a beer and to talk business. We've done this a few times before. It's usually about his wife or the last time he played golf. I pull into his driveway and he told me to meet him out back. After the usual how are yous, he tells me that him and contractor had a bit of an argument and they're limiting him from now on. Then he turned to me and said, there's a meeting Friday. I want you there at 9 o'clock. I hesitate. I wasn't sure what it could have been. You know how your parents would ask, do you have something to tell me? And as a kid, you would go into a panic and think about all the bad crap you did at school. I calmly managed to say, sure, I'll be there. A few beers and stories about fishing trips and I head home. The meeting was this morning, and as soon as I came in, everyone shook my hand. Some I've seen before and said my hi, how are yous to. Others I've never met in my life. This was an investor meeting. Some of these people are worth figures in the 9 digits. I was internally freaking out after finding out, but if you've been paying attention, you know I know how to keep my cool. After our greetings, we sat down and waited. It wasn't clear who we were waiting on until an hour later, contractor walks in with his usual stained t-shirt and cargo shorts, while I'm in a nice dress shirt and tie. Everyone made a face and greeted contractor while we got settled again. Contractor didn't seem to notice me until we all sat back down. I saw him do a double take and give me a look that said, what the heck are you doing here? I had requested today off, so I could only imagine what he was thinking. After introducing the new investors to the old investors, owner got started saying how we're gonna have an amazing year and an amazing future for the company. I suppose he was just hyping up the new guys so they would invest more. About 2 hours of production values and budget stuff, blah blah blah, he turned to me and said, I'd just like to take this time to congratulate Original Poster for passing the general contractor's exam and his newly acquired business. I smiled and thanked him. Then he continued, as we're growing, we have a demand for new and inspiring people within our company. After hearing about Original Poster's success in both our company and his, I'd like to personally ask him a question in front of the whole team. My heart is pounding in my throat, as each word sounded slower than the last. I took a side glance at contractor that is visibly sweating at this point. Original Poster, how would you like to be our new property manager? You may still have your business and do your own work, but we'll pay you exclusively to be our personal contractor and help take care of all new and old properties. Everyone turns to me, and I take a second to respond. Just then, contractor stands up and says, what the heck? I'm your contractor. I've been your contractor for over a decade. You can't just replace me for some jerk that doesn't know what he's doing. Owner smugly looks at contractor and says, we're not replacing you. You'll just answer to him now. All tasks, orders, and billing will go through him now. If you'd still like to work for us, granted you mind your mouth and tone, you'll run anything you do by Original Poster. Contractor looks enraged and he turns to me. You're fired. You have no business here anymore. Now leave. Owner chuckles and says, you don't have that power anymore, as long as Original Poster agrees to my question. I turn to him and say, are you sure you can afford me? I laugh and shake his hand. Yes, this is all I've ever wanted, all that I've ever worked for. Now we can get some real work done. I have to admit, I've been practicing that response since I was asked to come to this meeting. Contractor stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him, and I didn't see him for the rest of the day. After he left, we continued to discuss the goals for this year, and it turns out they bought 60 new houses for me to work on with the investors' money, and he just looked at me and said, can you handle that? I happily said, yes sir, trying to keep my eyes from watering. All I thought about was my family, and how proud they would be of me. In a little under a year, I received a great license, my own business, and pretty much non-stop work. If there's anything you guys listening can take from this, I hope it'll be this. Don't settle in life. Be hungry to better yourself, and be the best person you can be. The only person stopping you is yourself. That really is great for our original poster. Going from working a kinda crappy job with a crappy boss to being your own boss and having your old boss work under you is probably about the best scenario anyone in that situation could ask for. Our original poster earned it though. They worked really hard to do what they could do to better their position in life. And when something wasn't working out for them, they took matters into their own hands. When you give yourself that kind of control, you can achieve almost anything. Suddenly, there are no boundaries in your way, only the ones that you set for yourself. I really don't have a lot to add to this one. Yeah, sure, boss is a jerk, wouldn't give a raise to their hardworking employee, yada yada yada. That's not the stuff to focus on this one. This one's all about where our original poster ended up, and that is great for them. My boss says work project is stupid, so I quit. But the company fires my boss so they can keep me. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell for notifications. Back in the day, I worked as an independent IT consultant and was hired along with another independent to subcontract on a team for a major consulting house. We'll just refer to it as consulting house. Everyone else on the team was a consulting house employee. The two of us were not supposed to tell the client that we weren't part of the consulting house, but the client figured it out pretty fast because we independents were doing most of the work, while consulting house's code monkeys were busy filling out spreadsheets all day and going on team building exercises. But I digress. The project ran past its initial deadline, and my contract expired. I stayed on a week-to-week basis as a professional courtesy to get the project finished, because I liked the client if not the team. Unfortunately, the consulting house project manager was booked somewhere else for his next gig, and they brought in a new guy to replace him. Let's call him David Stress. David flew in on a Monday morning to get the project handed off to him, and immediately started crapping on everything to mark his territory. He was derogatory and belittling to the team and liked to raise his voice. I was working in my office, well, actually a closet with folding tables that I shared with 3 other team members, and didn't hear what he was saying out in the main room, but I could sure hear his tone. Then he burst in and demanded, "How are we doing specific payroll-related conversion task?" I said, "We're using Program X." He waved his hand dismissively and scoffed. "Well, that's stupid. Program X won't work for this. You need to do something else." The other indie was in the room at the time, and she saw me coming up out of my chair. She later told me she thought I was gonna deck him. I knew he was full of crap because I wrote Program X. It was custom code for this project, and he had no way of knowing what it would or wouldn't do. He was just trying to bully me and be the alpha dog. I did not in fact deck him. Instead, I went to the client's payroll manager, with whom I'd been working closely for months, and who was driving the client side of the project. I laid it on the line. I said, "Look, I know you know I don't work for Consulting House. I'm here on an independent contract. That contract is up and I've been working here week to week just to get you guys through." She told me she was aware of this. Okay, this new guy, David Stress, is a bully and a blowhard, and I'm not gonna work with him. I have no contract at this point, and with him running the project, I won't be back next week. I'm not asking you to do anything specific about it, I'm just letting you know as a courtesy so you can plan to transition my work to someone else. She sat back in her chair, thought a moment, and said, "Okay, thanks for letting me know." 2 hours later, David Stress was removed from his new position. The payroll manager, faced with losing the one technical guy on the team who actually knew what was going on with a very complicated payroll system, called Consulting House and said, "We don't want this new guy, take him away." Consulting House rearranged some things to keep the original project manager with the project. The funniest part of the whole thing was that Consulting House had scheduled a welcome dinner for David at a posh steakhouse that evening. Rather than create the further embarrassment of canceling the dinner, they actually went ahead with it as a farewell dinner for David, who had been on the project for less than 1 day. It was fun to watch the jerk try and put on a brave face for that. I did stay on with the project until the end after that, and it went through successfully. I don't know why when there's a change in management, they feel the need to do this. They gotta change everything up just to show that they're in charge and you have to listen to them. I get that everyone has a preferred way of doing things, but sometimes you gotta just roll with the punches. In this case, you're just finishing up a project that's already been on the go for however long. It's not really your responsibility to come in and start making all these decisions. You just need to make sure things continue to move along smoothly and get to the end. Being a jerk along the way isn't gonna help you at all. We're only closed 2 days a year and still have problem with snobby entitled people. A couple years ago, before I changed departments and went to gas station, I was a cashier at a local grocery chain. I had the misfortune of working Christmas Eve. Luckily, I worked in the morning and was out by noon. I'm working the till, and that Christmas Eve morning, it was actually raining and cold. No snow. It doesn't snow where I live. I was near the exit, so I would constantly get a breeze of cold, wet air. I had been working the past 4 days so I could get the following week off and be able to hang out New Year's Eve. Things were going smooth when I had my first difficult customer of the day. Snobby lady, we'll call her. Hello, find everything all right?
Yes, I did. It's nice and cold outside, but I'm not liking the rain.
Yes, it is, and me neither. Hopefully it doesn't rain tomorrow on Christmas Day.
I know. I'm gonna come early to try and get some more things for lunch and dinner for my family tomorrow.
Now, just a note, we're closed Christmas Day. We always have been. We have signs on every single cash register stating we're closed and will open the following day. Oh, well, you should get those items right now or later today. We're gonna be closed tomorrow. It's Christmas Day.
Oh, no, I'll just come tomorrow.
We're closed tomorrow.
What do you mean you're closed tomorrow? It's Christmas Day. I have things I need to buy.
And I have a family I'd like to be at home with and spend my day with. If you have things you need to buy, do so now.
I need to speak to your manager now.
At this point, I was like, great, I shouldn't have said that. My manager shows up to speak to her. Yes ma'am, how can I help you?
Your employee, original poster,
While looking at my name tag,
said you're closed tomorrow. I demand this store be open. I have things to buy and I'm the customer.
I'm sorry ma'am, but we have signs posted all over the store stating we're closed, and the signs have been up for over 2 weeks now. I suggest you buy what you need now.
She was quite taken aback at this response. I know the store manager here, and I'll make sure you and original poster get fired for turning away a customer.
If you'd like to speak to him, he's actually right there.
I will. Enjoy being jobless on Christmas.
She left and went immediately to speak to him. He paid little to no attention to her and asked her to leave the store if she was going to continue to harass him and his employees. That store manager had probably never stood up for his employees. He usually does what the customer wants, even though it's against corporate policy, but apparently not for this jerk. I'm sorry, it's Christmas Day. You gotta give people a break. They want to spend time with their families, like the original poster said. To sit there and think that you can demand that the store be open and fully staffed so that you can come in, when everyone else is probably going to be at home with their families and understands that everything's going to be closed and they should have gotten their stuff earlier, is incredibly entitled of you. That's really putting yourself up on a pedestal thinking that everyone should give up the time with their family so that you can come in and shop that day. You're literally in the store right now. Get what you want and leave. And do us all a favor and don't come back. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below. And don't forget to subscribe. New manager fires me without realizing I'm the only one that can operate the forklift. I report them to OSHA and they lose 3 weeks of profit as a result. I worked at a retail chain that sold pet supplies and products. When I started working there, it was great. Family owned and everyone I worked with was fantastic. The owners eventually wanted to retire and sold the small chain to an investment group. Once the investment group took over, almost all but a few employees were let go, forced out, or just quit. I held on a little while longer before I got promoted at my other job. The new company brings in a new manager to my store. My store was the top performing store in the entire chain, bringing in about $10,000 to $12,000 a day on average. It was always more on weekends and especially around the holidays. The new manager is a Mr. Company man. Company told him they only want employees around for 2 to 3 years. Myself and 2 others had been there 10 plus years. So naturally, he began ruffling feathers and giving us all a hard time. Unfortunately, he decided on me first. Mr. Company found out I worked 2 jobs. The 2 jobs are not in related fields, so there was no chance of any conflicts of interest on my end. However, my second job requires me to work nights and weekends. When Mr. Company Man found this out, he demanded I work nights and weekends there. So it was fair for everyone. I didn't work nights and weekends there because I was that store's only OSHA certified forklift operator, and deliveries didn't come at night. They came weekday mornings, every day. Mr. Company Man didn't want to hear that and told me I either had to work nights and weekends or that day would be my last day. I told him, don't threaten me with a good time. I suppose today's my last day then. I was pretty ticked off about that, but it's not a big deal now. Ended up being the greatest thing that ever happened to me. I went home early. I didn't end up finishing my shift because screw them. But when I got home, I decided to call my local OSHA inspector and report them for not having a certified operator on staff, as well as numerous other hazards. Needless to say, they lost close to 3 weeks' profit from all the violations the inspector found. I was surprised they even showed up. In my state, the inspector will call you back after an inspection and tell you if your claims were founded or not. Mine were. And Mr. Company Man got his butt chewed out so bad that he ended up quitting. What kind of company doesn't want to keep around their seasoned employees? They're just trying to get a bunch of kids in, I guess, and rotate them out quickly. That way they don't have to pay them benefits or make them full-time or something. I don't know. Either way, they're trying to save a buck, and clearly it wasn't worth it. They ended up losing 3 weeks worth of profit. That's a big hit for any company. The only good news is that everyone else that still works there benefited from our original poster's actions. Hopefully this place will be a little safer and treat their employees a little better going forward. Entitled woman insists I call the store owner so she can get an additional 5% off her bag. This just happened today. I work in a miserable small retail store in a high-end mall. We carry many brands of bags. We'll call one brand T. Mind you, in this mall, there's also the main store for the brand T, where they carry more products from that brand. They're our competition since they're the main store. On Sundays, we close at 6 p.m. This loud woman and her husband walk in at 5:50. Guess who's gonna be home late again? She grabs a backpack.
How much is this tea backpack? I want to buy it for my husband.
Well, it's usually this price. However, the store's offering a small 10% discount because of Mother's Day.
Only 10% off? That's it? Well, the store tea is offering more than that. They're doing a 15% off.
That's not possible since we carry the exact same brand and have the same prices. Plus, the brand notifies us whenever there's a sale. It's at this point that she changes her story.
Actually, no, not tea store. I saw this exact same backpack in another store downtown. The lady offered me 15% off.
What store was it?
Downtown.
Okay, maybe it's a different model. I scan the bag and add our 10% discount. Okay, so it would be this price plus tax.
You're not going to give me a discount?
Sorry, the discount offered is 10%.
But the lady downtown offered me a 15% off. Can't you call the owner so he can give me an additional 5%? Call him, because the customer's always right.
Calling the owner is a no, since he hates to be called over things we already know. I can't call the owner. He let us know yesterday that we're only allowed to give a 10% discount maximum on any store item. No more than that.
But the woman downtown showed me in her screen that the system lets her give a 15%. Can't you do that?
You're right. I can put in whatever discounts I want in the system. I can put in 15 or even a 20, but the owner strictly said 10% only. T-Store isn't even doing any discount at all.
Well, the owner should offer more than that.
I chose not to respond to her at this point to avoid escalating the situation. Her husband then tells me it's fine and that he'll pay for the bag. He hands me his card and then he politely asks me to monogram the bag. I monogram it and the loud woman just pulls out her phone and tries to find the bag cheaper. I assumed, however, that she didn't find anything. The husband is happy with his bag and thanks me. They both exit the store. I ended up leaving at 6:30. However, we're commissioned and it was an expensive bag he purchased, so it's okay. Yeah, I promise you, the owner does not want to be receiving that call. He'll just tell that customer to shove it. You think the rules don't apply to you? I'm sorry, that's not the case. You think the owner's gonna give you an additional 5% because you asked? They don't care. They're the owner. They can do whatever they want. They're the one that's allowed to tell you to screw off. At least it worked out for our original poster that they got a little something extra for their trouble. I snapped when I found out that another guy saw my girlfriend naked. I'm a 25-year-old male. My girlfriend, Lydia, is 23. She lives with a roommate who has a boyfriend, Jeff. We gathered at their place last Friday for pizza. After a while, Jeff asks Lydia if she's still scared of being here alone the nights the roommate goes over to his place and I can't come. Lydia's always had trouble with being alone at night, and most nights I stay on FaceTime with her till she falls asleep so she feels safer. The roommate laughs and says that if she hears a noise in the bathroom, at least it'll be a ghost and not her locked in passed out. Lydia just mouths to me that she'll explain later. When we get to Lydia's room, I ask her to explain, and she tells me that this afternoon she wasn't feeling good and ended up fainting in the shower. So Jeff had to break the door to get in and help her. She said that she already felt better and didn't want to tell me because I was going to be worried about nothing. I said that it wasn't nothing if she had fainted, and that I should be aware of these things to help her. She said that now it would just be a funny story about how Jeff broke the door and roommate had to cover her with a towel so they could come to the rescue of her naked body. In that moment, I saw red. I asked if Jeff had seen her naked, and she said she couldn't be sure since she was unconscious, but roommate said that he stood out of the bathroom until she was covered. I asked if Lydia thought it was fair for me to not know that another guy had seen her naked, and she said he didn't actually see her naked, and that it shouldn't matter since he was only helping. I shouted that she just said that she was unconscious and couldn't know if he saw her. She told me to be quiet or that they would hear me, and I shouted that I didn't care, that a man just saw my girlfriend's body and I had a right to be mad. Jeff and the roommate come in then and explain that he never saw anything. He just broke the lock and waited outside until roommate gave him the clear. I said that I didn't believe him, and roommate jumped to his defense saying that she was right there, making sure the situation wasn't embarrassing so they could take proper care of Lydia without her feeling weird. I shouted that I didn't care. I didn't like the idea of Jeff thinking about my girlfriend naked. Jeff then shouted at me, saying that I should respect his girlfriend and mine, who'd spent a whole day saying that she was fine but still looked a bit pale. He said that he only did it because he cared about Lydia, and that I was a jerk who didn't deserve any type of help. Hearing him say he cared about her was it for me. I left without as much as looking at Lydia as she begged me not to go. Over the weekend, Lydia had to be admitted to the hospital as she didn't feel good again, and Jeff and roommate prohibited me from seeing her, saying that I didn't deserve her. Obviously, the whole hospital thing sucks, and I wish I was there for her, but I still think I was right. At this point, I'm not mad at Lydia anymore, just at Jeff. Am I the jerk? This is an incredibly misogynistic move. While I totally understand why you wouldn't want another guy to see your girlfriend naked, this is a different story. It was an emergency situation and he didn't even see her. You're literally freaking out over something that didn't happen, giving your girlfriend who's clearly not doing well a hard time over this, and saying at the end that you're not mad at her anymore? What was there to be mad at her for? For fainting? For needing help? You understand how you're immediately the jerk when it's broken down like this, right? Like, if she's in serious need of help and there's no one else around, what is Jeff supposed to do? Just leave her there until someone else comes along? No, of course he's gonna do whatever he has to do to help her. I will say that them not letting you see her in the hospital might be a bit of a step too far, but I agree with them that she needs to get rid of you as soon as possible. I ruined our neighbor's kid's dreams of becoming a YouTube star. I've just started running an online D&D game. Last couple of sessions, I noticed my connection was really bad. The usual stuff didn't help. After a while, I found out that a couple months ago, my neighbor had borrowed the Wi-Fi password from my girlfriend because they were having connection problems. It was supposed to be for a day or two while their new ISP connected them. Saturday before last, I changed the Wi-Fi password. The connection is a lot better. On Sunday, the neighbor's wife turns up. "Is something wrong with the internet? I can't log on." I changed the password. "Oh."
Can I have the new one?
No, you were only supposed to borrow it for a few days while you got your own connection, and I couldn't get a connection when I needed to. There's a short discussion that boils down to,
Oh, we didn't think you'd mind.
I didn't if it was for a few days. It's been about 3 months.
But you have it anyway.
Yes, because I pay for it, and when you use it, you're taking something I pay for and making it worse for me and my household. That evening, my girlfriend mentions that she'd gotten a text from our neighbors and they said they were having problems with their internet again, and she'd lent them the new password. So I had another chat with the neighbors, which boiled down to something like this.
But we need the internet. Sammy,
The daughter,
needs it for school, and Kev
the husband,
loves his games.
then get your own connection.
I did, but they can't get out till Wednesday.
So just 2 more days then. I'm gonna change the password again on Wednesday.
If you must.
Me being me, I forget on Wednesday. I don't remember until game night comes around, and I notice the connection is a bit dodgy when I'm setting up. I change the password again and everything clears up. The next day, I get a 10-minute lecture from the husband that I should stop harassing him by cutting off his internet in the middle of playing his games, that I'm ruining his daughter's life by stopping her from studying, and that I need to give them the new password so his daughter could load new videos to her YouTube channel. I walk away, close my door, and enjoy a beer. Monday comes around. A note is glued, yes, glued, not taped, to my door. I'm not sure which of them wrote it, but here's what it said.
I hope you're happy, jerk. You ruined my girl's hopes. You've no right to cut off my internet. You stopped my daughter from streaming and ruined her chance of becoming a YouTuber. Hope you're effing happy, jerk.
Wow. You want to talk about a sense of entitlement? How about thinking that you own someone else's internet connection? That's a little insane. Maybe these people just don't understand how the internet works. It's not something that you have a right to, although that is a whole other conversation. Your neighbor pays for it. You don't have one of your own? It's not their problem. They were nice enough to let you use it for a little while. Why don't you just call that a win? If internet is clearly so important to you, then get your own. My brother wants to put down my dog because he growled at my niece after she taunted him all day. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell for notifications. I've fostered a multitude of dogs in my life and dealt with a lot of behavioral problems. Dog aggression, cat aggression, food aggression, separation anxiety, super high prey drives. I've seen it all. And I've certainly encountered my fair share of dogs who weren't safe around small children. So I feel extremely confident in saying my current 5-year-old lab is safe for kids. He's basically a giant teddy bear and loves everyone. However, it's always been my personal philosophy that dogs and any other animal really should never be left alone with young kids, even if it's the sweetest, most mild-mannered dog in the world. The kids don't understand when they're pushing the dog past its limits, and the dog cannot reasonably be expected to put up with being harassed long after it's signaled that it would like to be left alone. My niece has never been good with my dog. She pulls his tail, climbs on him and lays on him, hits him, pulls his ears, gets in his face and yells at him, and never gives him a second to himself unless she's forced to. Meanwhile, he's basically a saint with her, but every dog has its limits. I stay as on top of this behavior as I can, forcing her to leave him alone when it starts to seem like too much, and locking him away in the bedroom if she won't. My brother and sister-in-law really just don't get it though. I've tried to talk to them about this behavior a bunch of times, and they know it's wrong, but they think it's wrong in the same way that her refusing to share or not picking up her toys is wrong. They don't understand that it's dangerous, and that if she was left alone long enough, my dog might lose it and attack her. This has been going on for over a year. I've tried to have this conversation with my brother over and over, but he always acts like I'm criticizing his parenting, which is not the case. I don't think my niece is especially bratty or out of control for a kid that age. It's just that this behavior is dangerous to both her and my dog, and it needs constant intervention. The same way that a small kid playing with the stove isn't especially bratty, but it's especially dangerous and needs to be curbed ASAP. I even tried having a dog trainer friend explain this to him, and he he still didn't get it. I've tried to come up with excuses for why we can never meet at my house for our family hangouts, but I couldn't think of one the other day, and my brother and niece came over. I was cooking dinner and not paying enough attention to make sure my dog was okay, which was absolutely my fault and I accept responsibility. I asked my brother a few times to keep her away from my dog, but he kept saying she was fine. I did move my niece away from him a few times, but I wasn't vigilant enough, and my dog ended up getting to the end of his rope and growling at my niece. I immediately grabbed my dog and brought him into my bedroom. I didn't punish him at all. Frankly, I'm glad that he signaled loud and clear that he was uncomfortable. I would never want to discourage him from doing that, because then the next time, he'd skip the growling and go straight to attacking. I came out of the room, ready to talk to my brother about how this is what I've been talking about. But he was furious, yelled that my dog is a menace who should be put down, and left. I completely understood his reaction. That's his daughter, and he was afraid for her, and nothing else mattered to him. But he hasn't calmed down at all since this happened, and won't talk to me except to say my dog needs to be put down and he won't be speaking to me until it's done. He's also tried to involve our parents, who said they'll absolutely not be getting involved. They know my niece's behavior with my dog has been a problem in the past. I haven't heard from my sister-in-law at all, which makes me think she might agree with me. Knowing her personality type, I don't think she'd sit out of a fight like this if she thought my dog was actually dangerous. The way I see it, this is solely my fault and my brother's fault. I shouldn't have allowed my niece to harass my dog. I knew what could happen. And I was more concerned about how upset my brother got when I tried to bring it up than I was about my niece's safety. I should have just said my niece wasn't allowed around my dog until she got a bit older, and dealt with whatever fallout there was within my family. Similarly, my brother should have kept a better eye on his kid, and not been so defensive when I tried to explain the problem. My dog, on the other hand, put up with being harassed for over a year, and when he finally was pushed to his limits, signaled very loudly and harmlessly that he needed to be removed from the situation. He's not dangerous, and I will not put him down. My brother is now saying that the entire family is sided with a dog over his child, which is not the case. It's just that there are a lot of other solutions to this problem. I'm perfectly happy to crate my dog when they come over, or leave him in another room, or just never have them over again and hang out somewhere else. There's no reason for my niece to ever see my dog again, and I'd be happy to talk over a solution with him. It's just that he won't talk to me at all, and I don't know what to do. Should I give him more time to cool off? Should I go over to his house and try to talk? I don't want to ruin this relationship. We're very close, but I'm just not putting my dog down over this. I gotta say, this might be our most reasonable and mature original poster yet. I don't think there's any point of this story where I disagree with their analysis of the situation. Labs are very gentle, very family-friendly dogs. But yeah, every dog has its limits. This kid sounds like they're just being a kid, but to a dog, they're being an absolute nightmare. It's understandable that the dog would get ticked off and give the kid a warning. The kid's not going to understand that warning though, and that's where the problem comes in. I think our original poster handled it the best way they could. I agree that you don't want to discourage the dog growling. You need that warning. That's how the poster knew to remove it from the situation before anything really bad happened. I'm sure it still would have taken quite a bit of pushing to really get anywhere, but the dog's trying to let you know, and that's a good thing. The brother really needed to take this more seriously. It was only once there was actually an issue that all of a sudden his Papa Bear instincts kicked in. And I get that. You're protecting your kid and your emotions are gonna go wild in that moment. But I really do agree that there's gotta be a better solution here. There's no need for the dog to get put down. He put up with quite a bit before finally just doing the equivalent of speaking up and saying, "Hey, can you get this kid off me?" You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below. And don't forget to subscribe. Karen demands I get fired because I don't know what printer she has at home. So this happened a few years ago when I was 17 and working at my old job. I'm working at a very large electronic and appliance store based in the UK as a sales assistant. I'm positioned in the printer and ink area for the day. In walks Karen. She looks like your typical withered old hag that loves to tick people off for a living. I approach her like we're supposed to do with every customer. "Hello, how may I help you today?" With my customer service voice and smile.
I need ink for my printer.
She scoffs while barely looking up at me. "That's fine, I just need you to tell me what model printer you have so I can give you your specified type of ink. Every printer, along with a couple or more models of each brand, use a specific type of ink. So I just need to Google which printer the customer has and it tells me what model of ink they need." She looks up at me, looking slightly shocked.
Isn't it your job to know this?
I explain that I have to know what printer she has, and that just the same brand of ink as the printer isn't going to work.
So you're telling me that you don't know what you're doing even though they're paying you to work here?
Now slightly more agitated, I say, "There's no way for me to know what model printer you have at home. If you could please go home and take a picture of the model, I can give you the exact ink that will work for you." She snaps and starts walking towards the front desks, saying,
"You're useless, and I'm gonna get you fired."
I first watched her move to the PC repairs guy to bark her carinated version of our encounter, then move on to the cashier girl, and then to my floor manager before walking out. Now, my manager's an understanding guy and knows how crazy some of these people can be. She had told him that I was completely useless at my job and need to be fired right away. Turns out she came in the day after and then the day after that too, just to complain about me and repeat her statement. I didn't get into any sort of trouble for the encounter. Not a crazy story, but a funny one regardless. I feel like that's something that a lot of Karens don't realize. Managers are aware of people like you. They know that you come in and have some mild issue with an employee and blow things up out of proportion. That half the crap that comes out of your mouth isn't true and that they're probably going to be backing their employee. Employees that have to deal with this on a daily basis like to know that their manager has their back. You're most likely not going to get the result you want. French students harass and bully me for asking them to speak English in an English taught class, so I get them expelled. This happened a few years back in China at one of the universities there. Here, I was studying Chinese language, and I shared my language class with some people from France and Belgium. Our Chinese teacher was a really nice little lady that also happened to speak French. So often, when the French speakers had a question, they would ask it in French. Now, I didn't really mind it all that much, but at some point, it got to the point where about half the questions in the class were asked in a language I didn't understand. Obviously, that's detrimental to my own learning experience, since understanding the questions is important for me to learn the language. So I politely asked them if we could just do the class in English, because about half of us didn't understand what was being asked. The teacher was very nice about it, and afterwards asked the students if they could rephrase their question in English when they asked it in French. But apparently the French and Belgian students didn't take it so well. They were constantly glaring at me, and whispering among themselves in French. Well, I just shrugged and moved on. However, outside of class, they were always sticking together in their own little group, doing things together. At first, they would just walk past me when I was sitting down having a beer with my friends, and they would just glare. But at some point, it came down to them cursing, talking crap about me to other students, and spitting on my lap when I was sitting in the park. Obviously, I was seething, so I might have called them a few words which were a bit too unsavory. Anyhow, they didn't take it well. So the next day, I found out that they had scribbled all sorts of horrible things on my dorm room. Obviously, I was ticked, but I didn't really know what to do. So I reported it to the International Student Office. ISO was really nice and understanding, but told me they can't actually do much unless I provide proof that something's happening. Thus, I went online and bought a little recording camera, kinda like a dash cam. It had the time and date and everything. After the university had painted my room door over, they couldn't get the markers off apparently, I hung the camera up in a corner of our dorm corridor and pointed it at my door. Then I left, and made sure to loop around to walk past the group of French/Belgians so that they knew I was leaving campus towards the metro station. I had some nice dumpling soup and a beer, and when I came back, lo and behold, they were hardly creative with their insults, just more of the same. But this time I had proof. I checked the video and I was very pleased. 5 out of the 7 of the group were actually there, and all wrote down something on the door with permanent marker. One of the guys even kicked the door, which caused a crack at the bottom. These doors weren't very sturdy. They seemed to have a lot of fun doing it. Now, of course, the school was properly ticked off when I showed them the video. Normally, the students would just get a stern warning. But because ISO was aware that they were doing it before, and also about the fact that they were harassing me the whole time, they were less understanding and suggested that the board had to decide on this to expel the students. And so they were. All of this took place over the course of a couple of months, so we were nearing the end of the semester. The 5 students who scribbled on my door got expelled just before their exams, which meant that all the time they spent at the university was effectively worthless, since they didn't receive any credits for it. But it gets even better. After this whole ordeal, I had sent a neat anonymous letter in Chinese. One of my Chinese friends helped me write it. I sent it to the Public Security Bureau, letting them know that these students had engaged in vandalism at our university. A few weeks later, after I had already returned home, I was told by a friend of mine who was on good terms with their group that some of them had booked tickets and hostels to travel in China at the end of the semester. However, their visa extension was denied by the Public Security Bureau on the basis of their misdemeanor at the university. I'm not sure if the second part was caused because of my letter or simply because the university informed the police, but I like to pretend that it was the former. So I was just laughing my butt off as they slaved away half a year in courses for which they'd received no credit and had to cancel thousands of dollars worth of travel plans. That was a truly sweet feeling. I feel like it's a bit of a difficult situation to be in. Asking people not to speak their native language is typically not going to go over well. Even with the best intentions, people tend to be sensitive about that. It's a very difficult topic to broach. In this instance, I feel everything checked out. The teacher agreed that stuff was being missed by the English-speaking students. Sure, it would be great to be able to speak to your teacher in your native language, but not at the cost of the other students in the class. If you guys are having one-on-one time, then that's totally fine. But when you're in a class and everyone speaks one language and half of you speak a second language, you should be speaking the language that everyone speaks. Especially considering that this is a university where people are essentially paying for knowledge. While you might not think that your question or the answer is overly important to their education, you don't know in the long run. All of it is knowledge that is being exchanged, and they have a right to know what's being said. While I understand that it can be something sensitive to have to bring up, I feel it needs to be understood in cases like this. Entitled driver wrecks his brand new car, then injures and blames me, a pedestrian, for his wreck. So, backstory. I work for a subcontracting company that does really niche IT work for various municipal governments, and my truck is loaded with equipment for computer repair and road work. Like I said, it's niche, but this becomes important later. As such, I currently have a 2-hour commute, and while I do use the interstate during the day, I usually head home closer to midnight, and prefer to take state highways and back roads due to the lower speed limits. So, for our cast, we have me, Brad, the entitled driver, Renee, my fiance and coworker, Nice Girlfriend, Brad's female companion, and Chad, Brad's absolutely chill father. Now for the story. So as Renee and I were driving home tonight, we had noticed that a large rotted poplar tree had become uprooted and fallen into the road, covering both lanes. Normally I would have called local officials and then either waited for the tree to be removed or simply wait for them to arrive and then take a different route. Unfortunately, I had no cell reception in this area, and rerouting would have added an extra hour to my already long commute. As such, I figured I'd try to use my demolition hammer, which was the best thing available to me at the time, to try and at least weaken it until someone came by with cell reception. Then we could flag them down and get a call to local authorities. So I turned on our hazards, turned on our beacon, and Renee and I both put on our reflective vests and hard hats with built-in lamps. While Renee brought the tools over to the tree, I began grabbing the traffic cones to block the road. Enter Brad. As I finished setting up the cones behind the truck, Renee began handing me the cones to put up in front of the fallen tree. No sooner had I begun reaching for them when we heard the roar of a brand new sunrise orange Dodge Charger RT flying up the back road with a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit at highway speeds. I ran in front of the fallen tree, shining my flashlight on the already well-illuminated tree, and tried to flank down the Charger. It was no use. He never even hit his brakes. I dove out of the way at the last second as the Charger plowed into the tree, turning it into a horizontal fulcrum, and me into a baseball, as the tree struck my shoulder and launched me about 10 feet. I got up, extreme pain throughout my left side, and unable to raise my arm. Adrenaline coursing through me, I ran, or hobbled quickly, to the remains of the poor obliterated Charger, now smoking and leaking fluids all over the road. Miraculously, Brad and nice girlfriend, both about my age in their early 20s, got out and were completely unharmed, though understandably shaken. Renee, who miraculously found the one spot with coverage, called emergency services, and nice girlfriend called Chad. That's when I heard it.
Oh my god, my car! How could this happen? Why does this always happen to me? What would—
And that was when he looked at me, looked at the clearly uprooted tree, and decided to have a unique reaction. One that I never thought ever really happened. One that sounded like At this point, I think maybe he's injured too. Dude, are you okay?
No, idiot! Because of you, my car's completely totaled! What kind of moron cuts down a tree in the middle of the road?
Actually, the tree was already here. We only got here maybe 2 or 3—
BS! You blinded me with that flashing strobe light!
Pointing at the yellow hazard beacon on my truck, which I've used for years. This is when his nice girlfriend chimes in. Actually, I think that—
Shut up, all of you! I'm gonna sue you for failing to illuminate the tree properly.
This is irrelevant. At this point, I'm trying to be nice. Well, actually that's—
If you open your mouth one more time, I'm gonna—
This is when Renee steps in all her 4.5-foot glory.
Enough! It's not his fault that you clearly acquired your driver's license at a Happy Meal. That tree's very well illuminated. You clearly weren't paying any attention, and you hurt him. Look at him. He's limping, jerk. You're the one who ought to be apologizing for that stunt you pulled and the mess you made.
Silence. Deathly, unnerving silence, as Brad stood slack-jawed and making a strange choral noise. Suddenly, Brad's on an absolute rampage, kicking and throwing my cones, tools, and other various items from and around my truck into the forest, and off the road's 15-foot embankment. I wish I could tell you more, but it was about that time that Chad arrived along with first responders. We gave our statements, and I spent the rest of the time being checked out by EMS. The only thing that jerk really seemed to be worried about though was his car. Alright, so for this one, he's a young guy who just crashed his really nice new car. He's gonna be upset. The reaction he had though was more comical than anything. It sounds like he was having a complete meltdown, and just kind of pointing that anger in the wrong direction. Yelling at his girlfriend who was just in the car accident with him though is what really leads me to believe he's a jerk. If it weren't for that, I could have accepted that maybe he was just having a bad day and letting it all out. But when you're more worried about the car than your girlfriend, that's where I draw the line.
Are we the jerk for going to the dean of our university when our teacher tried to fail us after we outsmarted his test? My humanities classes were taught by 3 professors. Team teaching, lectures, small groups, etc. And that worked out most of the time. However, our final project was a classroom simulated society, and they split the classes in half to do this. They told us all that we would need to stay in the rooms in a portable and could not leave. The rules for the project were that the students would split into upper class, middle class, and lower class groups, with each group having an irregular amount of tickets for travel, money, and food and drink. The upper class got 10 tickets for almost every category, the middle class got 5, and the lower class got 2. Each of the 3 had to decide on how to spin their tickets and could give them away if they chose. The upper class was the only one that had travel tickets, and the lower class was the only one that had entertainment tickets, aka TV time. In the first of the 2 sections of the group project, all the students stayed the whole 4 hours, and the project went about how you would expect it to go, with the upper class ruling the other 2 and taxing them in tickets. That section of the project was during the school day, between lunch and dinner. Our section was directly following them, so we couldn't go to the dining hall for dinner. We also couldn't bring outside food or drinks. I had to eat on a schedule for medical reasons, but I was told that I would only be allowed to do so if I bought food or drink with our group's tickets. I was put into the upper class, so we had enough tickets for me to be able to do that, but then there were none for others to have anything. We, the 5 of us in the upper class, ended up splitting a can of pop and a small bag of chips. The people in our section of the project were mostly missionary kids. I'm not though, so we were mostly an idealistic bunch to begin with. All but one of the lower class groups left the building to go eat dinner because they knew they weren't going to get fed otherwise. They weren't allowed back in and got failing grades because they didn't follow the rules for the project. Cue malicious compliance. The rest of us followed the rules to the letter, but did it in our own way within the confines of those rules. The tickets got spread around mostly evenly, so everyone could travel, have at least one food or drink for their class to split, and have entertainment tickets. When it got to be 3 of 4 hours, our class started singing, "Show Me the Way to Go Home." We then started singing the most annoying songs we could think of for the last hour. We absolutely drove the professor up a wall, and they couldn't tell us to leave because they would have not been following the project rules either. We knew we were playing with fire with this one because the project counted for a good chunk of our final grade, but we didn't care after finding out that the professors weren't going to allow any exceptions to the rules, even for medical reasons. After we were done, we went to see if there was any way we could still get dinner. The cafeteria stayed open for us a half hour after it was supposed to close so we could eat. This was a Friday night. Here's the fallout. On Monday afternoon, we all came into the lecture hall buzzing about the 2 extremes of the project. The people who ran off knew that they were going to fail, but the rest of us in both sections were sure we were going to get passing grades. We were all told that the first section, the one that imploded, would get passing grades and that the second section, the ones that shared more equally, would fail. One of my friends worked at the campus bookstore and knew that each stack of the project ticket/rule books came with a teacher's manual. Since the professor did this project for all their humanity classes at this level, they didn't get a new teacher's manual each year unless the project changed drastically. So the rest of the teacher's manuals were sitting in the back of the bookstore, locked up though. The friend told his boss what happened and his boss gave him a teacher's manual. Those of us that completed the failed section of the project had the professor's words on tape because we were allowed to record lectures. We took that and the manual and made an appointment as a group with the dean. The dean thought the professor had been utterly ridiculous and we got passing grades for the project. The professor tried to argue that there was no way that the project could ever have had this outcome, but the dean didn't go along with that. His answer: you teach at a Christian university and expect that your students aren't going to follow their beliefs? The professors had to change the syllabus so that the next year had the simulated society project removed and something else put in its place with better rules. But let us know, were we the jerk? Oh man, I could only imagine a class project like this happening today at the community college I went to. It would have probably been chaos. Group projects in general are always a hassle in my opinion because you always have someone who doesn't pull their weight. I will say my best group project was in high school. I had an English teacher that told us that we needed to be in a group and act out our next project. I couldn't tell you what the project was, but I was with a couple of buddies and we decided to act out a fight scene of some kind. I remember wearing a white t-shirt and my friend stabbed me with ketchup for a blood effect. For some reason our teacher's hot wife was there and we made her bust out laughing. It was a good day and I'm pretty sure we got an A because we made her smile. My clueless coworker almost kills people by not listening to my commands. First things first, this did not happen to me but a friend of mine who doesn't want to get in trouble. Any names will be changed to protect their identities. Anywho, secondly, the night lead was new, fresh off the training grill and was not used to this aggravating coworker's antics. Loaf was at the grocery store she works at, helping in the freezer section, unloading boxes of frozen food like vegetables, chicken, fish, the like. She is working when her coworker, let's call her AC for aggravating coworker, comes over asking to help because as she claims, she had worked the frozen section before. Loaf, with no reason not to believe her, said that she would be glad for the help. Now Loaf did know that AC was susceptible to cold, so when she arrived at the frozen section without a jacket or anything, Loaf asked why AC wasn't wearing anything to keep warm. Here's how the conversation went. Loaf was putting down the box she was stacking. Hey AC, don't you get cold easily? Yes. So where's your jacket? Oh, I left it in the break room. But you want to help me in the frozen section? Why didn't you grab your jacket? Oh, I just didn't feel like it. Loaf looks at AC. You didn't feel like it? But this is the frozen section and you're susceptible to cold. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Go get your jacket. AC huffed angrily. Fine, whatever, is what she said as she sauntered off to get her jacket. After she leaves, Loaf continues working stacking things where they go. A few minutes later, AC returns, thankfully wearing a jacket. AC walks to the first box she sees and opens it, revealing a very specific, very obvious brand of fish, labeled the same yellow as the section of the fish wall, which is where all the fish are supposed to go. AC looks at the package, then looks at the section next to her, frozen meals. Definitely not where raw fish is supposed to go, and then she continues looking for where she puts the fish in that section, ignoring the fish wall completely. At first, Loaf let it slide, assuming she would realize that it was not where fish go. Loaf looks over a few minutes later and AC is still looking for the fish among the frozen meals. Loaf walks up to her and says, AC, the fish goes over there on the fish wall, pointing to the very easily spotted wall of fish, at the end of the wall behind her, next to the deli. AC nods and proceeds to walk over to the fish wall, but takes about 20 to 30 minutes to find where the exact brand of fish goes within the fish wall. She finally emerges to put the fish away, coming back to get another box. This time, it's a box of pre-made frozen meals. AC proceeds to take them all the way to the fish wall, despite taking a long time to look for fish in the frozen meals section, which was right behind her. Loaf looks at AC strangely before once again helping her find the right section, because I'm sure you readers have noticed, everything is divided by sections. So she finishes putting up that box and then picks up another one, still frozen meals, but a different brand of frozen meals, and once more goes to the fish section, despite having just been shown where the frozen meals go. Loaf once again gets up and directs her to the frozen meals section, only for AC to pick up another box, still of frozen meals, and head directly for the fish wall. This happened not once, not twice, but several times. The naive creature that is Loaf blew off AC's lack of awareness of the frozen section because it had been a while since AC had worked in that section. Loaf assumed that with enough help, AC would finally remember her way around. She did not. With each time Loaf had to help AC find the right section, she became more and more frustrated, until she huffed a little bit louder than she should have. She walked away to prevent herself from doing anything drastic, such as braining AC with a bag of shrimp. She ended up finishing up her own section and going to the restroom for a bit. When Loaf returned, AC was on the floor, sobbing her heart out and complaining to the night lead that Loaf had been bullying her and screaming at her. Now, there were several coworkers who were around and had seen everything that had happened. When questioned by the lead, the coworkers all corroborated that everything AC was saying was untrue, and that she had thrown familiar fits in the past. AC was promptly taken off the frozen section, and another coworker was called to help Loaf. It wasn't until later that everyone finally learned why AC, having worked in the frozen section before, was unable to find where anything went within their sections. She had left her magnifying glass at home, which she needs to be able to see clearly, despite already wearing glasses with inch-thick lenses. Everything else was just plain ignorance. But let me know, was my friend the jerk? Hold up. You are telling me that there's legit people in this world with inch-thick glasses and they still need a magnifying glass to see things? That's wild. But that also makes it understandable why she was making so many mistakes. But I feel for the OP's friend here, because I've definitely worked the frozen section before, and the last thing you want is to deal with somebody who's making your job harder. It's too cold for nonsense. Am I the jerk for speaking up to my bosses when I find out that I haven't been getting properly paid for our shared waiter tips? Normally I'd say hell yes, but this one's tricky. My check was short about $80 to $100. Actual amount unknown, but that's a good estimate. My manager forgot to put me in the tip pool one night. I was a patio server, it was frigid, nobody sat out there, and I got cut. So I didn't have a cash out. They probably brain farted and forgot I worked a few hours. But here's why I'm wondering if I should just let it go. It's the best job I've ever had, by massive margins. I'm a dinosaur in this industry, so I know. It's the best management I've ever worked for, besides this incident, of course. I get anything I want. Set schedule, done. Best shifts, done. I'm not treated fairly, I'm actually the favorite. I'm the only one with full-time hours and I make bank. I easily out-earn my coworkers by margins. I get these perks, I suspect, because I shut up, show up, and do my job and don't cause problems. I used to be the squeaky wheel, always complaining about something. I think I'm now reaping the benefits of learning from that mistake. I know it's money I've earned and I should speak up, but I also know it's going to cause these managers that I like to have to call corporate and make a thing of it. And honestly, I don't need the money. Like I said, I'm well taken care of. In fact, this check is what I expected with that shift. So would you speak up? It's the first time anything like this has happened to me. They're organized and professional, and that's why I'm kind of laughing about it. Should I just let it go and continue enjoying my amazing job, or rock the boat for money I technically don't need? Am I the jerk for this? I do need to point out that this story is actually 3 separate posts, and that was the end of the first one. An update to my last post about not being put into the tip pool for a shift. After reading the advice, I decided to casually bring it up with my manager. I figured I'd say, no problem, I don't need the money, please don't bother with it. But now, I'm freaking livid. I said, hey, I noticed I wasn't put in the tip pool for this day. Does that mean it won't be on my check? And she was like, well, sometimes if people don't take tables and depending on how much work they actually did, we may just enter them in as a trainee, so you'll get paid that rate instead of the tip pool. To which I said, oh yeah, I've never heard of that. Nobody ever told me that. So sometimes we might come to work and depending on the section we're given, we may get cut and lose half of our hours. But in addition to that, we might also not be paid at the exact rate we're expected. So now it's a double whammy. How is it fair that I got dressed to come to work like everyone else, but because the section you decided to put me in had a lack of business, I'm being paid less than a third of what my normal rate is? And further, if that's actually the case, has there been a time that you paid other servers like that and I was the beneficiary? Because no other server here has ever mentioned being left out of the tip pool, and there were nights like this that they didn't have any tables either. But I had to share my tips with them. I went on to say because, oh boy, I had a lot to say, I just failed to see how it's fair that someone might have to come to work at a much lower pay rate without even being told in advance. Don't you think it's a simple courtesy at minimum to tell someone if they're drastically changing their pay rate? And now that I'm learning this, I don't trust that there's any transparency in the tip pool situation if you're just randomly deciding if someone worked hard enough to be in the tip pool. Wouldn't you be a little upset if your check was light and your boss was like, oh, hey, we paid you less that day? Don't you think people have the right to know what their pay rate is? And now that I'm learning all of this, how and when can I see this tip pool books from the past few months that I've been working here? Because I no longer trust that it's being done fairly, and it's my legal right to see it every night. Anyways, that's all I had to say, and she just stood there wide-eyed as I kept going. Finally, she said, I'll check with the other managers to see what he did. To which I replied, please do, and I'd like to see those tip books tomorrow. I was calm, my tone was professional, but I was still shook. That wasn't the response I was hoping for. So much for my job that I was bragging about in my last post. Turns out these jerks are shady too. Moral of the story, I'm glad I spoke up. It wasn't an oversight or a brain fart, and even if you think you like your job and trust your managers, always get your money. This was the final update to this story. So I was able to access my pay stub this morning and did some math to figure out how and if I was paid for that half shift. Turns out I was paid the tipped minimum wage only, with no tips. So even despite the convo with the manager yesterday, they may sometimes intentionally take someone out of the tip pool and pay them minimum wage for that shift. That wasn't done either. I'm either owed tips or owed a makeup from the company for not meeting minimum wage that day. Our state laws are per shift, not per pay period, thank God. So now that I know this was an oversight, they definitely wouldn't expose themselves legally like this. I'm actually surprised our payroll company didn't automatically notice this. I can speak to the other manager tonight about getting that money, and I'm definitely getting it now. My post about letting it go was so naive. I'm also going to have a hard talk with him about her response, that sometimes if people don't take tables and depending on about how hard they work, we will take them out of the tip pool and just pay them as a trainee instead. I'm going to go to bat for all the employees on this topic. It's just so wrong. Here's what I intend to say. Let me know if there's anything I should add. I'll tell him it's not fair if they do that, because it's not the employee's fault that they were assigned a slow section. They did what they were supposed to do. They got dressed, commuted, did side work, and performed as part of the team as expected. It's a pooled house, and the point of a pooled house is specifically so a server doesn't get screwed just because their section sucked. And if I wanted to take my chances on getting cut off at patio shift and walking home with minimum wage, then I also want to reap the benefits of crushing it in a busy section like I usually do. And I want to walk home with $700 tips I earned in that busy section instead of $300 I usually walk home with. Because again, that's how a pooled house functions. I can go elsewhere to a not pooled house if I wanted that. Furthermore, this notion that you'll judge someone's performance and if they worked hard enough to be in the pool is BS. Everyone who works here works hard. I'd be just as upset if I learned another coworker wasn't in the pool just because their section sucked. Nobody deserves to come to work and be paid 1/3 their wage unexpectedly. $14.25 an hour, our state's minimum, is still at least $4 less than our lowest paid employee in the building. And even he gets an additional $3 to $4 per hour because of our kitchen appreciation fee. So if our lowest paid employee is making $21 to $22 an hour and he's 16 and sits on his phone all night, he's our porter, we do love him, how the freak can you responsibly justify paying anyone $14.25 an hour? You know we're all adults and have bills, right? I can't afford to work for $14.25 an hour, and if that's even a possibility, then consider this our final convo and I'll walk out the door. Wish me luck, maybe they'll surprise me and tell me they found an oversight and they are paying me the tips I'm owed. I won't settle for a makeup to minimum wage now, in light of this new developments. I want to keep the tips I worked for and deserve. But let me know, what would you do in this situation? Man, this was kind of funny to read at the start. Opie was bragging that he had an awesome job, and came to find out his job is just as shady as everyone else's. I don't really have much to say about this story, other than you always need to collect the money that you're owed. A stupid policy at work causes me to do some malicious compliance. So quick background, I'm from the UK. I have worked in the US since 2001. I work for a smallish company, I was around the 100th employee, that was growing steadily. This story concerns personal time. There's 5 days a year that you accrue that could be used for when you're ill or need extra days of vacation. You could only accrue up to 120 hours max, 3 weeks. I hit my maximum after 3 years, and I rarely used it, just left it topped up. My thought was that my parents were getting older in the UK, so I could use the time in case there was an emergency. So I kept my bank full for that purpose. Side note, you stop accruing hours when you hit 120. And you don't get those hours back, so I gave up some days to keep the available topped up. Sometime around year 5, I did take a personal day. A couple of weeks later, I noticed that in a paycheck that my personal time had not changed. It was still 112 hours. It should go up about an hour and a half per 2 weeks of working. Waited until the following paycheck and still 112 hours. I call HR to ask. It appears at some point the previous year, they changed the policy to max out at 80 hours. Anyone with more would not lose it, but would not start occurring until they were below the new maximum level. Obviously, I wasn't happy with this, so cue malicious compliance. Immediately, I take 5 personal days off, which got me to about 72 hours. From this point on, every time I was about to max out my personal time, every 5 weeks or so, I would schedule a day off, or use up multiple days over Christmas to extend my vacation visiting family. I would game the system between what vacation I could carry over versus personal time. They never gained an extra hour out of me in personal time again. Then in 2011, we were bought out by a larger company. In April of 2012, my wife and I had this huge vacation planned, a 16-day African safari gifted by our tour operator my wife worked for her 10-year anniversary. This was planned at least 12 months ahead of time, as I needed to plan out my vacation time. Up until this point, we were allocated all of our vacation for the following year on April 1st. Around mid-December, the new company HR brought us in for a meeting. They were announcing that they were making changes to the vacation and personal time to bring us in line with theirs. As of April 1st, all vacation time is now accrued. You can borrow up to 5 days in advance with prior approval. Also, as of this date, personal time is no longer personal time. It's sick time. You need to be sick to take it, or use it for doctor's appointments. On the plus side, they are increasing it to 7 days per year. Though not much use to me, I haven't taken a sick day off in 15 years. You will need a doctor's note for 3 days or longer of illness. I pointed out to them, unlike the company that bought us, we actually had a production facility that manufactures actual products at the rate of over 1 million per day. The reason we had personal time and not sick time was from experience. They weren't interested. This is the policy. We know what works for you better than you do. At the end, they asked for any questions or clarifications. I raised my hand and asked, I have a vacation that's already approved, and I've been planning it for over a year, and it starts in April, because that's when we would get our full allocation. But it's longer than the 5 days I can now borrow. And you have also limited the use of personal time. What do I do? I was expecting them to say, come and see us, we'll work something out. What I actually got from these fools was literally a shrug of their shoulders with the face that said, tough crap. So I said, screw them. As my wife worked for the tour operator, and as there still was some space available, they helped us move up the vacation to March. I calculated my personal time to max it out just as we were traveling. I blew all 10 days of personal time on the last 2 weeks of March, zeroing it out just before the policy change came into effect, and borrowed a couple of days of vacation from the following year to complete the end of the trip. After the change in policy, the production facility ended up with machinery being shut down multiple shifts per week. We had 10 pieces of equipment that took 2 to 4 people each to run them. As operators or helpers were sick, then some of the machines had to be shut down. One person being out of the team would lead to a couple of other personnel having nothing productive to do on the shift, which ultimately increased costs and customer lead times. It's easy to schedule around a personal day that was booked in advance, but if you run a lean shift to maximize profits, it's impossible to schedule around someone calling in sick. Rather than amend their policy and admitting that they didn't know best, they hired a couple of extra people each shift to cover the sickness policy. Official staff around the company would be mysteriously ill every 2 months or so for a day or two at a time. Most weren't even subtle about it and are always sick on Fridays and Mondays. I left around 4 years ago. The policy stood and staff milked it for all it was worth. The resentment of the policy change ran deep. You reap what you sow, I guess, but let me know. Am I the jerk? Policy changes that mess with your vacation days is always the worst at big companies. My old job when I first started had it to where if you never used vacation days throughout the year, they would pay out those days at the end of the year. So a lot of people who weren't the vacation or days off type of workers usually love the end of year paychecks. Well, about a year or two after I started, they switched to a new system and were no longer going to pay out vacation. You either used it or lost it. Now, this was an issue because a lot of those no day off guys were also lifers, so they had the most vacation time built up. Now that they had to use it, it started to cause a lot of problems in the schedule. Some people had weeks off at a time or just started bunching up a bunch of 3 to 4 day weekends most of the year. Don't even get me started on around the holidays. But that just goes to show you, if you change something that works just fine, the workers are going to find a way to make you pay for it. Entitled coworker tries to take credit for my research, but I end up making him look stupid in front of the boss. I work in a fairly prestigious biology lab on the East Coast, where we study various pathogens. I was trying to isolate a certain bacteria from samples containing a wide array of species in order to infect mice with the strain under various conditions. While doing research to see if there were mediums that were selective for the target bacteria, or if there were any antibiotics that my target was resistant against that would kill anything else, I ended up with various ways to isolate the bacteria, using a process I thought of myself to test the efficiency of each isolation method. Before starting my experiment, I ran it by my coworker who is a seasoned immunologist of 10 years. Let's call him Dan, who trained me in working with bacteria when I started the job. I'll probably rant about Dan in another post. He thinks my idea is great and gives it the green light. And for the next 2 months, I'm running the experiments, calling biotech/pharma companies for quotes on their products that I'm using to isolate the bacteria, and end up with a big spreadsheet that contains both the efficiency and the cost/benefit analysis of all the methods I came up with or found. I show my results to Dan and he's ecstatic, although he mentions that it's likely going to be a while before we use the data and make a decision on the isolation method due to us waiting on samples to come in. I send the spreadsheet along to my PI, head scientist at the lab, anyways, and shift my time to other projects I'm working on. Another couple months go by, and after not hearing anything from Dan about my patient samples, another coworker comes up to me and asks where I can find a set of certain plates to isolate the target bacteria from. I'm confused and ask him why he's looking for those, because based on my experiments, the plates he wanted were the least effective and most expensive way to select the bacteria we were looking for. Not to mention that I had no idea that we had ordered any more than the 10 plates that I used to run my experiment. He argued with me and said that Dan's research said otherwise. That confused me even more. And when I asked him to show me what he was talking about, he proceeded to show me my own spreadsheet, where he quickly realized that he had been misled and said that Dan must have made an error in the spreadsheet. I told him that I was the one that ran the experiments and got the results, and if Dan ordered the bad plates, then he must have just wasted the lab's money. The other coworker said I probably told Dan to order the wrong plates, but when I said I had no idea plates were being ordered at all he could say was, "Oh, that's weird." Sure enough, later that day I look inside our cold room and see several boxes, roughly $5.5 thousand worth, of expensive, inefficient plates, and I confront Dan about it. I asked Dan why he ordered so many plates and if he had been telling other people that he had done the experiments. He laughs a little before asking if I had even read the spreadsheet that I made, and states that the plates he ordered were the best based on my criteria, and that because he taught me how to work with bacteria, I was piggybacking off his methods, and him validating my experiments before running was tantamount to him doing the work. He told me not to worry about it anymore and that he would be presenting the data to the PI because he had already prepared a slideshow and everything for it. I wanted to open up the spreadsheet and tell him that he had just wasted a lot of money, but he was so condescending and sure of himself about having ownership over my work that all I said was, "Okay," before returning to my bench. Later that week, we have our lab meeting where Dan is presenting his work to the whole lab and states that we can finally move ahead with isolating the target bacteria from the patient samples. Sure enough, my spreadsheet is on the TV used as a projector, and my PI asks when we could expect the materials used in the most efficient isolation method to arrive. Dan corrects the PI, stating that the bad plates were the best and very proudly stated that the plates had already arrived. I then interjected, very bluntly saying that the plates that he ordered would recover over 90% less of the bacteria than the method my PI had picked from the spreadsheet. Dan fell silent, face going shades of red before he stumbled through a justification of ordering the bad plates. How in the long run he'd save some money by not ordering the materials needed to do the method the PI wanted, only for my PI to chime in stating it was absolutely worth it if it meant the tenfold increase in recovery, and that we shouldn't be wasting samples, time, and money on bad plates. Dan very quickly blurted out that it was my spreadsheet and that there must have been a miscommunication between us before ordering the plates before he quickly sat down. And all I said was that I was not told by anyone that anything off my spreadsheet was being ordered. My PI asked Dan if he submitted the data to me before I sent it to him, and Dan sheepishly admitted that I was the one that ran the experiments and compiled everything. So he must have misread my data and ordered the wrong materials. And I was about to suggest that I possibly misspoke when showing him my data the first time before my PI cut him off to move on to the next lab topic. The rest of the meeting he was red, glaring at me out of the corner of his eye. After the lab meeting, Dan pulled me aside and asked me why I didn't tell him that he ordered the bad plates. I told him that since it was his research, he should have known what method gave the best results since he would have calculated the yield of each method when doing the experiments, and that if he wanted my input, he should have told me before he ordered them. I went to the PI and cleared up the confusion, putting in the right order for the materials that needed best to isolate the target bacteria from our samples, and making sure that he knew that I had no idea that my data was being acted upon in case Dan went behind my back somehow to throw me under the bus. Needless to say, we communicated far less after this whole ordeal, and I quickly found other people in the lab to work with. I later found out that he had been taking credit for all of my work I had ever did while I was at the lab, and while it was frustrating for me to still have to tell people every now and then that I made the figures or I did the experiments that Dan told them about when my data comes up, up, more people have started to discuss their projects with me and ask for my help since Dan was exposed. And I find solace in my memory of his red, twisted face looking like it was about to explode in front of everyone, barely able to speak out a word to cover his butt. But let me know, am I the jerk? I love when people try to take credit for other people's work and then fall flat on their face. I can see how this might happen in other industries that you can BS your way through in a meeting, but stealing something like lab work? That's crazy. I would think you would need a lot of knowledge to pull off a heist like that, but I guess that didn't stop Dan from trying here. But I feel for the OP when they mentioned that Dan had been taking credit for all of their work and often had to speak up to let people know that they were the one that truly did the research. I felt like that on creative projects before, where I put in a whole bunch of work only to be overshadowed by someone who put in less. Also, I will say that it's nice when someone in a position of power actually notices the work you've put in. One time during my high school film class, my teacher noticed that I was staying after school every day to work on a project that I wasn't even the director for. So when it came time to do the final reviews in front of the whole crew of the short film, my teacher went into the credits and added my name as co-director because of the amount of work I was putting into the project after hours. Sometimes it's the little things that matter most. Am I the jerk because I think the truck driver I work with might have a negative IQ? So I work in a Canadian grocery store chain. I've been working there for quite a while as I got the job at the age of 14, and I'm currently 18. Because of this, I started to pick up some extra responsibilities. One of these responsibilities is to receive what we call rush orders. I don't know if they go by different names or if every place does them since I don't know grocery stores outside of my area. In case this isn't a common thing, a rush order is an extra order that we get from a third-party supplier that will come on the same day rather than coming in advance. We have two companies that we get rush orders from. Company A has had some issues sometimes, but nothing unusual about the attitude of their truck drivers. But Company B often comes with truck drivers that are really impatient and have intelligence so questionable that I don't know how they passed any type of interview. This is just usual grocery store stuff though. Some truck drivers are good, some are bad, one company is worse, but oh well. That was until today, when I had a truck driver that screwed up so many times that it made my night by watching him get screwed over by his own stupidity. It was a usual day. I came in, my director told me that we had two rush orders that were coming in, about the same size and with similar items as yesterday's rush orders. I was a little annoyed because my direct manager overuses rush orders and gets way too much stuff on them, which then throws me off as I have to work it, but once again, oh well. Company A comes by around the same time as the day before and goes by completely fine with no issues. Company B comes by a little later than the day before, and I don't really care since it's how trucks tend to operate. However, there was a little slight issue because another department was currently unloading one of their trucks. Trucks coming in at the same time often happens, and I asked the manager of that department, also the only manager in at the time, so I will be referring to him as my manager for simplicity, how long he will be unloading his truck because I still have a 15-minute break that I want to take before I unload my truck. My manager tells me that he estimates it'll be 20 minutes, and that if he finishes early, he will just unload my truck for me, and I can get it when I'm done. So I take my break. However, I should mention that before I took my break, the driver of Company B asked if he could borrow our pump jack. I've also heard that it's called a pallet jack because his truck door is broken and isn't opening. In hindsight, I shouldn't have let him use it, or I should have gone with him to use it. But at the time, I didn't care, and I didn't think anything of it. About 5 minutes into my break, the driver comes back with our pump jack, but there's an issue with it. His door is still broken, and now our pump jack is too. One side of the pump jack is permanently lifted and barely fits inside of the skid, making the jack pretty much useless. After seeing this, I realize he's one of those drivers, and I pause the timer I have for my break to go get the story on what's going on. I have to go with the driver to look at his truck and how the door doesn't work. And I don't know why he thought a pump jack would work, but it didn't. And I gave him a time that he would need to be back by for me to have time to manage it. The driver leaves and I go to give an update to my manager. My manager is pissed at the driver and tells me that if he comes back, to get his name. I finish my break and I work along as normal till an hour or so later when the driver comes back. As I hear the beeping of the truck backing up, I know that this is going to be good. While I wouldn't mind getting the name myself, I thought it might be better for me to make sure that everything is done right, so I let my manager know that he is back, and we go to receive the truck. My manager starts questioning the driver and is trying to get him to write down his name and company, which the driver is playing dumb about breaking our jack, until my manager says to write it down or he will have to call their company dispatch, and he's only asking since it makes both of their lives easier, so the driver writes it down. We start prepping to receive, and luckily for some random reason, the driver has his own pump jack in the truck, and since my manager has his own job to do, he leaves me to do the unloading. Of course, our single skid of supplies was at the back of the truck, blocked off by several other skids. Normally I would be annoyed, but at this point I'm in no rush to get things done, and this is really funny to watch, so I'm actually kind of glad that I got to see more. Cue a montage of me trying to unload the truck, and the truck driver constantly getting in the way and wasting time. Multiple times I had to explain that I have to do things a little differently than he wants, and he would give me a look that I didn't know what I was doing. He would try to do it himself and proceed to try, only to realize I was right. Even with my little experience and slight struggles with driving a jack, I probably could have unloaded that truck in half the time. And if he wants to treat me like I don't know what I'm doing, then I'll absolutely take the free show and watch the truck unloading equivalent of fitting a square peg into a round hole. After a decently long process, I'm finally able to get the truck properly unloaded. I start cleaning up the area and go through the mental checklist of everything I need to do before the driver leaves. As I'm doing this, the driver gets back in his truck and is about to leave. I realize he never signed or got a store copy of the invoice for our order. I turn to my manager just beside me and ask, "Did you sign the invoice?" He had not. This means that the proof of purchase does not exist, meaning we could just say that we didn't receive your order, and they would have no way of forcing our company to pay. I highly doubt we would do this though, since it would cause more work on our end and it would burn a bridge that we don't need to burn. But the idea of the driver realizing that he forgot what is one of the most important parts of his job makes me laugh inside. And I do hope that whoever calls them about our jack gives them a little scare about it. But once again, I don't think that'll come about. The final icing on top, however, is my manager is annoyed at the attitude he showed, so before the driver left, he fully closed the back door of the truck. I hope that driver liked the trip to the mechanic to get his door open, because he's likely going to need to do it again. After the driver left, it was pretty uneventful. I made a custom invoice to record everything that came in, I worked through the rush order, and I made sure to let my coworkers know about this ridiculous story, including a less summarized version to my direct manager to keep him in the know-how. But let me know, am I the jerk? When I worked retail, I didn't really do much unloading from trucks, but I can relate to having to deal with people who just got in the way and made your job harder than it needed to be. I'll never understand people that think they know better than people whose job it is to do a certain task. I asked for a serious offer at my job, and I actually got one. Elsewhere. This happened about 5 years ago. I was working in an early stage startup as a software developer. The former developer quit before I entered and I was his replacement. One part of the offer was becoming a partner with some shares of the company at one point. I showed a lot of initiative, always giving new ideas and trying to improve things. One important detail is that my only boss at the time was the CEO. After around 4 months, they hired a guy who was friends of the founder of the company. And he had pretty good references since he worked before in one of the biggest companies of the country. So this guy started being my boss, and his background is from another field, so he didn't know anything about the technology, software, or language we used, etc. Anyways, I instantly noticed his presence since before him the office was pretty quiet, and after this guy came in, he started making phone calls all of the time and talking with the CEO in front of everybody. Our office was only one room, so it was pretty hard to ignore. Before this, I was always overworking, arriving at the office around 9 a.m. and working until 8 p.m. or so, simply because I loved the project. But after I noticed how loud the presence of Mr. New Boss was, I started going pretty early in the morning so I could work at least from 7:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. until Mr. Boss came in. The best part about this was I was leaving around 5 p.m. He was shocked because this was the first days that he saw my new schedule. Since he got in charge, everything was top priority. We had a few meetings where I explained my point of view about this, but it didn't change much. For you to understand the kind of changes he was doing, here's an example. We had the typical to-do list with 3 statuses: to do, doing, done. He changed this to a to do and done only, because this would save time. So I didn't know what the mobile developer was working on and if he needed something from my side right away looking at the to-do list. I had to manually ask him and also update him when I needed something done on my side. Well, after a few months of Mr. New Boss being on board, I decided I needed to be a partner or I'm gonna leave the company. I explained the situation to the CEO and to Mr. New Boss and said that I did a lot of things during this time, they loved my work, so I needed to be a partner as well, as that was something that they offered at the beginning of my contract. The CEO told me, "We will get back to you with an offer." Mr. New Boss nods. In the meantime, I was setting up some interviews with other companies in another country, and I received an offer that was 3 times my current salary. CEO and Mr. New Boss called me in after a few days to have a chat. Mr. New Boss showed me some papers with some vague information and then started talking about how important it is to be a partner. It's not a 9-to-5 job, making a reference at my new schedule that I changed since he entered. And then he started a lot of BS about compromise and no weekends and no paid extra hours and so on. He finished his speech and the CEO didn't have a single word. Mr. New Boss asked me what I think about that, so I answered, I think I was waiting for an offer with numbers and I don't see any. Then Mr. New Boss said, "Well, before that happening, we need to see that you're actually willing to work, like I mentioned before, staying later than 5 p.m. for example." I'm not, and I'm giving you my 2 weeks notice right now. I already have an offer waiting for me in another country. "Yeah, sure, no worries, I understand." The CEO said nothing. I came back to the office and told the new company that I would take the job, and in 2 weeks I'll be moving there. The next day, Mr. New Boss asked to talk to me and he offered me a 10% raise. I told him no thanks, I already took the other job. 2 days after that, same story. He told me that he thinks he can get me a 30% raise. I laughed unintentionally because he was really trying to convince me. And I said, no thanks man, and don't keep trying because it's useless. "Okay, sure. So, let me ask you something if you don't mind." "Sure, boss." "How much did they offer you?" Without even finishing, I answered, 300%. "Okay, nice." He stopped trying to convince me after this talk. I still had 1 more week at the company, so on the last day, the founder appears. He was above the CEO, by the way. He called me in for a chat, and he went straight to the point. "Can I offer you anything for you to stay?" "Not now, I'm actually traveling tomorrow." "Okay, I'm sad that things went this way. If anytime you want to come back, talk to me directly. I can help you with relocation, flight tickets, whatever you need. Doors always open." "Thanks, I appreciate that." So I start working at the new company and I still help out the old one in transition a few hours a week. Paid, of course. They hired a new guy that needed some help. "The new guy needs some help installing the language we use." Let me see if I can understand this. The new guy is a language we use developer and he needs help installing the language we use? Is that correct? Yes. Interesting. Yeah, I can help with that, boss. So I helped this new guy with a few things, and after a few days I completely finished my collaboration with them and focused 100% in the new company. A few months later I found out that Mr. New Boss quits. 2 months after that, the mobile developer quits, the new guy that just got hired quits, and ultimately the CEO quits. So it's safe to say that I made the right choice. But let me know, am I the jerk? I'm curious on who would be to blame for the downfall here, the CEO or the founder. I feel like the problem in this whole situation was the CEO hiring his friend to a management position and then his friend having an issue with the dude that was actually doing all the work. The worst part of this whole thing is Mr. New Boss probably doesn't even think that he was part of the problem. People in those positions often don't. I'm not sure if this business is still up and running, but they sure did lose a lot of people, so signs point to no. It's crazy how one person can be so important to the success of a company. So if you're a manager, maybe treat your people better.
300-pound creep tries to pull my swimsuit strap off, so I devised a plan to ruin his life. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell for notifications. The year was 2014 and I was a freshman in high school. On a general basis, it sucked. I mean, it was an American public high school with literally thousands of kids. It's a given that it's not gonna be a fun time. One thing in particular that made it extra sucky though was gym class. specifically this one guy in gym class. This dude's name was Jerkface McGee. As the name would imply, he was a jerkface. At first, it was pretty standard high school guy in gym class level of obnoxious jerk. You know the type. Overly loud, unreasonably aggressive during games, bossy, tossing the collective brain cell back and forth between his two equally ape-like buddies, the usual. I don't know when exactly it happened, but he sort of developed an eye for me after the first couple of weeks or so. He started asking me bizarre questions that I now believe may have been some sort of innuendo. Sitting uncomfortably close to me, resting his hand on my gym shoe, generally creepy behavior. He once blocked a doorway with his body, and this dude was massive, forcing me to literally squeeze my way through and crawl over him. He then tried to grab me and pin me to him once I was almost through, but I'm very good at dodging physical contact whenever possible, and dipped on him before his giant gorilla arm could catch me. I still shudder thinking about it. I cannot emphasize enough how terrible this dude smelled. But the true breaking point came during the peak cruelty of this school-mandated sadism, gym swim. Before anyone asks, let it be known that yes, I did try to tell someone about this. I told my gym teacher first semester really early on that jerk was making me incredibly uncomfortable. The gym teacher waved it off, saying he was just playing around and that it's probably because he likes you. His suggestion was basically just to put up with it and wait it out, because he was sure jerk would lose interest soon anyways. Spoiler alert, he didn't. Second semester rolls around and the 4-week period of gym swim descends upon us like the bloated carcass of a catapulted whale, crushing us beneath its wet, foul-smelling body. 40-some-odd adolescents forced into a cold, overly chlorinated pool for 50-plus minutes adorned in swimsuits determined to crawl up our butts like Ant-Man himself. Basically, it was miserable. As I've mentioned in a previous post, I'm autistic, so the echoing sounds, reflected fluorescent lights, pungent odors, slimy floors, and assorted BS made the situation even worse for me. I wasn't officially diagnosed yet, so my complaints were written off as me being whiny, and I was told to shut up and deal with it. So I did. I think I had more meltdowns in that 4-week span than I've had in the past 2 years combined, but whatever. On top of the sensory overload, there was jerk. I think something about being allowed to go shirtless and stare at the nearly bare butts of girls for an entire period emboldened him, because jerk promptly lost whatever semblance of restraint he'd had until then. He made frequent attempts to grab me, trying to hold me against his bare skin, which was disgusting, and I spent most of the class trying to evade him. The swimsuit I was forced to wear fit a little awkwardly around my chest, which he was delighted in pointing out to his buddies, staring unabashedly at my breasts. He managed to sneak up behind me and snap the strap of my swimsuit, even trying to pull it down off my shoulder, but I jerked away fast enough to prevent that. I was furious at this point, but I'm like 5'2", maybe, whereas he was easily over 6'5" and probably 300 plus pounds, so I'm not stupid. While all of this was happening, my new gym teacher, they switched every semester, was busy trying to keep a couple of the other guys from drowning each other. She was one adult forced to watch over 40 rowdy kids in a swimming pool. She was a bit preoccupied. The final straw came one Wednesday afternoon, the event that finally pushed me off the edge of the rationality I'd been clinging to and sent me plumbing into a full-on bloodthirst. There I was, paddling around, minding my own business, when Jerk and his two goons managed to corner me. I'm immediately suspicious. Hackles raised, as they ask me fairly bland questions about how the pool is today and the like, sniggering the whole time. I give short, terse answers, trying to see if I could maybe slip past them. I see an opening and bolt for it, but Jerk was apparently expecting this. As I swim through the narrow gap between him and one of his friends, he stretches out his arm and actually manages to slip his hand under my suit and grab me. I froze for a moment. The delighted giggling of him and his friends echoed in my ears as if from 1,000 miles away. The next thing I knew, I was out of the pool, being held back by the gym teacher, and Jerk had a bloody nose. He was shouting angrily at me, calling me a crazy B word, as his nose gushed blood into the water. There was mass confusion among the class. I was told to change quickly and sit in the hall. Apparently, the gym teacher had heard me screech like a banshee, followed by a number of shouts, and had looked over to see me wrestle out of Jack's grip, jump on his back, and throw him off balance enough to smash his face into the edge of the pool wall. I remembered none of this, but I did find a few chunks of greasy brown hair clenched in my fist that I'd evidently ripped from his scalp when the teacher pulled me off. I washed my hands thoroughly. It was decided that I'd go in early to school tomorrow to have a little talk with the dean. They would have just sent me there straight away, but gym was my last class of the day, and the dean had already left by then for whatever reason, so it had to be postponed a little while. It was pretty heavily implied that I was going to be suspended or quite possibly even expelled for what had happened. I was furious. Not only had Jack made my life miserable, but his horsing around was now going to be the cause of my expulsion. I wasn't going down without a fight, but I realized I'd have to play this pretty smart if I wanted to weasel out of it. The next morning, I did two things. I put on mascara and I made a superficial but rather painful incision on my right thigh, high enough so as to be covered by my shorts. Normally, I hate wearing makeup because I don't like the way it feels, but I'd worn mascara before and noticed the interesting effect it had on my appearance. Specifically, I already have pretty long, pretty dark eyelashes, so adding mascara draws a lot of attention to my eyes and makes them look huge. Like total Bambi, eyes wide, innocent, naive, and harmless. I sat down in front of the dean at 6:40 a.m. I didn't need to fake the fear in my expression, but I made sure to throw in something that could be interpreted as guilt too, bowing my head and twisting my face in dismay. Needless to say, the dean was pretty ticked. "Do you know why you're here, young lady?" "Yes." "And do you know what you did is very serious?" Yes." "Care to explain yourself then?" I just wanted him to stop." "Stop what?" I just wanted him to stop touching me." As I said this, I reached my hand under the table where he couldn't see it and dug my finger into the cut on my leg, causing me to lurch forward as if in a sob. My other hand covered my face as my eyes watered from the pain. "Touching you?" His eyebrows were so furrowed at this point that they now looked like they were on a collision course for Mars. I spent the next several minutes divulging all the crap that had happened to me that year, digging into my injury for some tears whenever necessary, and by the end of it, the dean looked horrified. He reaffirmed that no, I shouldn't have attacked Jerk like that, but that they'd have to investigate the matter further. I basically got off with a slap on the wrist, and after multiple testimonies from other girls, Jerk got suspended for 2 weeks. I wasn't satisfied. They hadn't been able to expel him due to a lack of hard evidence, but I was out for blood. He returned to school 2 weeks later, and I was ready. One of his friends had a little brother in my bio class, a fairly chill dude named Owen, who I'd worked out a deal with. See, Jerk had been very vocal about his displeasure with me to his friends, which made its way to Owen, who, for the low price of bailing his dumb butt out of biology, was more than willing to share that information with me. I had a direct pipeline. Anything Jerk shared with his friends made its way directly to me via Owen, and as it turns out, this dude didn't keep a whole lot to himself. There was a lot of crap I was tempted to nail him for. For instance, I found out he was selling substances from his locker and had been cheating his way through most of his classes. However, I knew how suspicious it would look for me to report something like that so soon. I'd probably just look like I had a grudge, which I did. And I was just trying to get even, which I was. He slipped up really bad about a week after his return, and that was when I struck. See, he hadn't been subtle about his displeasure with my retaliation, and spent most of gym class sending really ugly looks my way. The gym teacher kept us as far away from each other as possible, but he managed to track me down in a passing period one day and rant at me about how bad I'd screwed him over, and that I was a lying little B-word and yada, and that he'd make me regret it. Funny, Stole the words right out of my mouth. I found out later from Owen that Jack had been bragging to his friends last night about the knife he'd stolen from one of those hunting stores downtown, and promised he'd show it off to them later that day. I seized the opportunity. I took a few seconds in the bathroom mirror, scratching at the scab on my leg until my eyes were teary, enough to really sell the terrified victim look, then bolted down to the dean's office, stuttering and shaking, crying for help. The front desk lady was understandably startled by the sight of a seemingly panicked freshman girl bolting into the office, and called the dean out right away. His face grew very serious when he saw me. "Mr. Dean, please help! He attacked me!" "Now, slow down. What happened?" "Jerk," I said, resisting the urge to grin maniacally at the hardness that appeared in the dean's eyes. He cornered me in the hall. He called me the B word and said he was going to make me regret telling on him. He's got a knife." "He what?" Everything moved very quickly after that. The security guards were told to search the kid's locker, while a couple of other security guards were called down to get Jerk out of his classroom and take him to the office. I was told by the front desk lady who had heard the whole exchange to hide with her in the copier room so Jerk wouldn't see me. They found the stolen knife in his backpack and the substances in his locker. That, combined with the previous charges, was enough to get him not only expelled, but arrested. I never saw him again, which is probably a good thing because I'm still mad and would probably have taken a run at him if given the opportunity. The worst part of this story is that you had to go to these lengths to get anything done about it. This whole situation is incredibly creepy and uncomfortable. You're a pretty tiny girl and he's a really big guy that's coming at you. You've made it clear you're not interested and he doesn't seem to care. That's a scary situation for any girl. And now you're forced to spend time with him in a bathing suit and all that. It's just asking for trouble. It sounds like this behavior was going on over a long period of time, so something should have been done about it before it escalated to this point. And you defending yourself shouldn't be something that you need to defend. He should feel lucky he only got away with a bloody nose. I really don't blame you for doing whatever you had to do to get rid of this guy. He sounds like nothing but problems. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below. And don't forget to subscribe. Karen won't get out of the handicapped parking spot, so we block her in. This happened a few days ago. I'm recovering from abdominal surgery 12 days prior to when this happened. I was finally feeling up for shopping and there were things I needed from the hardware store. I'm a 30-year-old disabled female in a wheelchair, incomplete quadriplegic, and I don't have a car, so I got a taxi there, one with a ramp on the back so I don't have to get out of my wheelchair. Mr. Taxi Man, who we'll call Bruce, dropped me off and I went in to do my thing. Nothing out of the ordinary. When I finished my shopping, I called to get the taxi back. It would be a 15-minute wait, but it was such a nice day that I didn't mind waiting outside. As I was waiting, I noticed that someone was parked in the disabled parking space, but there was no disabled tags on the windscreen. Annoying, but I honestly didn't care at that point. I just wanted to get home. About 10 minutes later, I saw a middle-aged woman walk out of the store and go straight to that car. She opened the trunk, put her shopping in, and went around to the driver's side. But instead of getting in, she got out a cigarette and started looking at her phone. A few minutes after that, I saw my taxi arrive. Bruce, being the polite and patient man he is, waited for the woman to drive out of the spot. Karen knew he was waiting for her, and she knew she was parked illegally in the disabled parking space. But do you think she cared? She finished her cigarette and got into her car. We waited, and then waited some more, until Bruce got really fed up and parked the taxi right behind Karen's car, blocking her in. This is when things got interesting. Karen began to honk her horn repetitively for a few seconds before she got out of her car.
What the bloody heck do you think you're doing? You blocked me in!
I'm very sorry, ma'am, but I needed the car space, and you seemed to want to stay there. Just thought I'd do you a favor. Now, if you don't mind, I have a job to do. Bruce gestured in my direction as I gave Karen a big smile. I hate confrontation, so I appreciated Bruce for doing it it for me. Bruce got into the car and fastened me and my wheelchair into place, all the while with Karen yelling profanities and threatening to call the police. If it were any other day, I would have been happy to call the police so Karen would get a fine, but I just wanted to go home. It only took a few minutes before I was secured in the car and we left, but I made sure to give Karen a smile and a one-finger salute through the window as we were leaving, which made the encounter all the more sweet. We've gone over ones like this in the past. Don't park in disabled parking if you don't need it, guys. Now, apparently this lady was middle-aged, so maybe she did have a reason for initially needing the spot, whether she was technically allowed to park there or not. The jerk part comes in when she knew the spot was needed and decided to stand around and have a cigarette instead. There was no reason for you to still be using that space. You knew it was needed and chose not to move. You're choosing to be a jerk. Like our original poster said, you're lucky she didn't have more time to waste, or maybe you would have had a ticket on your hands as well. I think you should just call it a win. You got off easy, honestly. I got mistaken for the press and got to meet 3 prime ministers as a result. Back in '89, Ray Nadeau was sworn in as Canada's new Governor General, the Canadian representative of the Crown. This was a big deal for me because I was best friends with his son, so my mom and I got invited to the inaugural gala in Ottawa. We were flown in a Gulfstream, I'd never been on a plane before, and would be staying at the Rideau Hall, the Governor General's official residence. To properly document this August event, I borrowed my uncle's very expensive, very impressive looking camera and lenses, and also got a new suit. I felt pretty darn important for a shy 10th grade kid. Anyway, I was waiting in line with the rest of the plebs to be ushered in to stand at the back in the House of Commons, when I was approached by 2 RCMP officers who asked me to step out of the line. Of course, my immediate thought was, oh crap, what did I do? They informed me that I was in the wrong line, and to please go with them. Confused, I look around and then down at myself, and saw the expensive camera dangling from my neck, partially obscuring the lanyard that allowed me onto the grounds. Holy crap, they thought I was press. I always looked older than my actual age back then. I glanced over to my mom and she silently mouthed, "Go," and so off I go to the press gallery. The RCs plot me into a cluster of photographers from the national press, and suddenly I'm sharing the same bird's eye view as Sandy Ronaldo and Peter Mansbridge, the Barbara Walters and Tom Bracow of Canada. I snap away happily and hobnob with members of the Fifth Estate for a bit and head for the stairs to go find my mom. Once again, I'm stopped by the RCs. Well, the jig is up, I thought. Sir, the press conferences are through the other exit behind you. What the what? Once again, I'm led into another room I have no business being in, and in the span of 20 minutes, I've met Trudeau, Mulroney, Chrétien, Bouchard, Turner, Clark, and a pack of others. These names might not mean much to non-Canadians, but trust me, these were some of the biggest, haunchiest honchos in Canadian politics for 3 decades. The only ones who knew I didn't belong were Ray himself and Roy Romanow, my province's future premier. They just did a double take and thought the whole thing was hilarious. Never ratted me out. Classy guys. So there you go. 3 prime ministers. 1 former, 1 current, and 1 future. All because I didn't own my own camera. I feel like somebody could have lost their job for this. This could have been a major security issue if this wasn't just some harmless 10th grade kid. Let's put that aside though and just accept that this kid got to do something not a lot of other people get to do. Being Canadian myself, I can confirm that there were quite a few big names there. At the very least, a lot of you may have heard of Trudeau. Our current Prime Minister is Justin Trudeau. The Trudeau they're referring to here was his father Pierre. But either way, we've got some big names in Canadian politics here. As our original poster said, not 1, not 2, but 3 Prime Ministers were met during this encounter. You know that's something you're gonna remember for the rest of your life. I gave beer to my 3-year-old niece. Yeah, it sounds bad, but it really was an innocent thing. I was at a cookout with my wife's family, and I just opened up a cold one. My wife's 3-year-old niece asked me what I was drinking, and I told her it was beer. She asked to taste it, so I poured like 1/10 of a sip into a plastic cup, thinking it would be too bitter for her. But, well, she liked it. She wanted more, and I told her it was a grown-up drink. But it was too late. She ran around demanding to drink more beer for the entire cookout. She wouldn't eat anything, just demanded beer, and they had to put her in a timeout. Anyway, the in-laws are mad now and the wife isn't happy. So am I the jerk? Okay, well, I might understand initially wanting to do it just to see her reaction. You gotta know that that's not a good idea. Your adult judgment should have kicked in at that point. No matter what way you slice it, it doesn't sound good. When you start the story off with, yeah, it sounds bad, you already know you messed up. My manager enforces strict rules hoping that I quit. So I maliciously comply and become the ultimate rules stickler. Here's what happened. Subscribe to Am I the Jerk on YouTube and hit the bell for notifications. I used to work for a manufacturing company who makes waste containers, dumpsters, and such, and at first it was a good job with a good manager and no problems. I enjoyed the work. It was a dirty, physically demanding job, but it kept me in good shape. I could just put in my earbuds and cruise through the day without any issues. My initial job was to prep the units for painting by polishing imperfections with a sander and grinding down the areas that were too rough, as well as cleaning them up after the welders were done with them. But after a while, they kept laying off so many people and dumping their jobs on me that eventually towards the end of my time there, I was quality control, helped the painter, was a warehouseman, finisher, grinder, and also janitor, for no additional pay beyond the small cost of living raises we got once in a while. Prior to having all these jobs dumped on me, after about a year of working for this company without any issues, new management showed up. And as they like to do, they started making all kinds of changes just for the sake of making changes. Things that made jobs harder with no benefit, cutting corners that shouldn't be cut, and generally hurting productivity and workplace safety. The change in management was bad, but it wasn't the end of the world. It made things hard for no real reason, but all in all, things were still manageable. Until I ended up off work for about a month with a collapsed lung that I still to this day believe was caused by working conditions there and lack of ventilation and PPE. When I came back to work, I was on light duty for quite some time, since I had surgery to repair the lung to prevent it from collapsing again. I went from the golden boy who they called on when everything had to get done to the red-headed stepchild of the company, and management was doing everything they could to get me to quit. They would throw my tools away, hide my stools so I couldn't use them while I was working, and hassling me over things like my earbuds, citing safety as why I couldn't use them, even though OSHA themselves told me it wasn't an issue. The production manager would lie about things and write me up for non-existent violations, and refused to fix my bay doors that had been crashed into by forklifts numerous times that had to be closed and opened with a crowbar by 2 people, since the track was mangled. Other things include the company giving everybody in the plant raises except me, catching me 5 minutes before leaving work to go on my weekend and informing me that we had to work the next day, and selectively enforcing safety rules, even making up rules on the fly. After about 6 months, I'd had enough, and decided that if they wanted to constantly cite policy and safety rules to mess with me, then I could play that game too. I would make this manufacturing plant the safest company on the planet, and ensure policy was followed to the exact letter. This was now my mission. I began to slow my work way down, and only do the jobs I was hired and paid to do. Instead of doing the workload of 10 employees with nothing in return, they now got exactly 1 person's worth of labor out of me. Customers' orders began stacking up. Deliveries were late. Bad welds and welds that got missed during production were overlooked, causing the units to have to be repainted when they had to go back to the welding lines to be fixed. The warehouse became a wreck with containers backed up to the point that people didn't even have room to work. I went from completing a large unit in 30 minutes to it taking me 2.5 hours on the same one. Not to mention all the repairs that needed done that were missed during production when before I would have caught them before the units even left the production line. Other petty things I did included not showing up to work on Saturday when the manager would catch me at the last second and tell me I had to. I took to cutting out the text in the employee handbook, citing that working under scheduled hours required management to notify you 3 days in advance, and leaving a letter with that portion of the handbook on his desk the following Monday. There was nothing they could do since I was following the handbook to the letter. At this point, it was a game of who would blink first. They could lay me off and I could draw unemployment on them, or I would quit. Next on the list was safety. They liked to hassle me so much about trivial things that I figured they would appreciate me going through the plant and documenting every single last OSHA violation, along with any general safety violations and anything else that wasn't right. I had a notebook that was filled with violations from one end of the plant to another. Things like crane lifts that were being used improperly with J-hooks that OSHA previously warned the company about, the same J-hooks they liked to hide every time OSHA came through the plant, welders that had fray cords around puddles of water, tools being left on top of units that could fall off and hit someone, lack of ventilation, particle counts that were too high, and forklifts that were not serviced enough. I tagged out equipment that technically shouldn't be used in its current state, and locked out the forklifts that needed brakes or any sort of maintenance. Eventually, the production manager took the bait and untagged one of the forklifts I had locked out due to having bad brakes. Anybody who knows lockout procedure can understand what a massive screw-up that is. Once I compiled my list of improvements, I went to the government official who was overseeing safety and procedure since we often worked on government orders. I gave him my notebook, informed him of my manager taking the lockout off of a defective forklift, then went on break and waited. About 30 minutes later, I saw my manager walking back from the head office and looking ticked beyond belief. Later, I heard from someone who knows him that he got punished severely, especially for the forklift. From then on, he avoided me and wouldn't even speak to me or look at me. After that, I continued to slow my work pace down and got a bit of satisfaction each day from a complete crap show the place had become, and how backed up it was every single day. After I left the company, I heard they hired 5 guys to do my job, and they still did a crap job at that. Had they treated me better instead of coming at me like they did, they would have been still getting the top quality of work from me that they got when I first joined them, and things would have went along just fine. I can't even imagine how much money I must have cost that company by sticking to the exact letter of the rules. Here we have another employee who went above and beyond for their company and was never acknowledged for their contributions. Employers love to add extra tasks to what you're responsible for, but never want to pay you for that responsibility. Our original poster in this case really just decided to be done with it and do the bare minimum that was required of them. You can only get taken advantage of for so long before you just get tired of it. And when a company's pulling shenanigans like this to get you to try and quit, they gotta realize that as long as you're still an employee there, you have the potential to screw them over way more than they do you. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and don't forget to subscribe. Negligent father tries to sue Starbucks after his little girl breaks her arm. This was Starbucks in the mid-2000s. It was a summer afternoon. Outside my old Starbucks is a small garden with some trees, some flowers, and a 3-foot-tall rock wall perimeter. The 3-foot-tall rock wall has been neglected over the years, and several rocks are prone to uncontrollable shifting whenever too much weight is applied. It's a decoration wall, not a jogging wall. Most parents advise their children not to run along the wall. Until today. A little girl is running laps along the unstable garden wall while her entitled dad is on his cell phone and ignoring her. Knowing that garden wall is unstable, I ask the little girl to stop. She ignores me, so I advise her dad of the possible danger. Sir, could you please ask your daughter to stop running laps along the unstable garden wall?
Why?
The wall's unstable. She could easily hurt herself.
Oh, you in charge here?
No.
Then don't tell me what to do.
I relay the necessary information to the shift supervisor who's presently in charge. Sir, could you please ask your daughter to stop running laps along the unstable garden wall? It's not safe and she could easily hurt herself.
Oh, are you in charge here?
Yes, I am.
I don't tell you how to make coffee. Don't tell me how to raise my kid.
Minutes later, a rock in the garden wall collapses beneath the little girl's feet. She loses her footing, falls 3 feet, and breaks her arm. The shift supervisor and I witness the whole thing. Fortunately, a third member of staff is an ex-reservist who knows first aid. Upon learning what has happened, he grabs the first aid and rushes to the scene. Hello, little girl. I know first aid. Can I help you? The little girl nods her head, crying too hard to speak. While the ex-reservist is applying ice and a splint to the little girl's arm, her entitled dad ignores them both, instead choosing to yell at the shift supervisor.
Where's your manager? I'd like to know why you didn't maintain your garden wall.
In actuality, the garden wall is the responsibility of our landlord and not the Starbucks coffee company. None of this information is making the little girl feel better. Entitled dad threatens us with a lawsuit for the next 15 minutes, repeating the same phrases ad nauseum.
Where's your manager? Why didn't you maintain your garden wall?
After he's satisfied himself with his yelling, he acknowledges his daughter and drives her to the hospital, barely thanking the ex-reservist who tended to her injury and her pain. The following day, entitled dad returns with his daughter and a lawyer. The lawyer takes statements from the ex-reservist, the shift supervisor, and myself. The jerk wanted to sue Starbucks for 5 figures, but in the end, a lawsuit never materialized. To the best of my knowledge, the little girl made a full recovery. Honestly, this is just kinda gross to me. His little girl got hurt and all he saw was a paycheck. You need to attend to your kid, dude. Other things are important right this second. You want to come back with a lawyer the next day? Fine, whatever. But for now, take care of your kid. She's scared and hurt. She wants your attention, not you yelling at the supervisor. Considering you were warned about this by 2 different employees, you can't really go getting in his face about it. My coworker buddy's ego was getting a little too swollen, so we had to deflate him just a little bit. So a bit of backstory. I'd been at my current job for about a year back then. We handle finances for big and small companies alike, and I enjoyed it immensely. Think of us as a kind of economic mercenary group. You need help? You put in a call and get help. Simple as that. Anyway, starting there, I quickly made friends with 2 other workers. Let's call them Bert and Ernie. Bert had been there for 3 years when this story takes place, and was a great employee. Always on time, staying late if needed, and asking if anyone needed help without prompting when he had time over. Stressing what a great guy he is because he's the victim of this story. Ernie had been there just a few months longer than me, and was a similarly great and funny guy, though he wasn't as punctual. Bert had landed us an extension with one of our biggest clients for his work, and even gotten one of their sister companies to sign up. Needless to say, this was a big deal, and everyone from managers to the vice president was praising him. This sadly got a bit to his head. He got cocky. He was still the same helpful guy as always, but he went from,
"Hey bro, should I help you out?"
to,
dear peasant, allow me, Lord Bird of Economica, to assist thee in thine labors.
I'm not exaggerating. Anyway, we needed to take him down a peg, and me and Ernie hatched an idea. See, I realized that Bert had never met my girlfriend. He knew I had one and we'd been together for 5 or 6 years, but he'd never seen her face. And so I set our plan into action. I went to my girlfriend, explained the situation, and told her my plan. Basically, she and her friend, let's call her Abby, would just need to go out drinking that Friday at a very specific pub. That Friday, I asked Bert and Ernie after work, hey, let's go to very specific pub and grab a few drinks. Both of them singles at the time, drinking was likely something they'd have done anyway. Might as well do it with friends. A few hours later, we're a few drinks in and starting to get tipsy. I get a message from my girlfriend. Pigeons have left the nest. A few minutes later, a second one arrives. Pigeons arriving at the second nest within 5. I cannot tell you how happy I am she used code words without any prior planning. Best girlfriend ever. This was my cue, and I started bragging to my friends, basically explaining how easy it was to pick up a girl, and all my tricks and how if they used them, they wouldn't be singles for long. Ernie, who knew the plan, just laughed it off, and Bert did the same. Seeing my girlfriend and Abby walk in, I say, tell you what, I bet you the next round that I can make that girl make out with me within 3 minutes of talking, pointing to my girlfriend. As expected, Bert takes the bait without any prompting.
Sure, I'll even put in the next 3 rounds. No way you can do that.
Ernie gasps as if in shock of Bert's bravery. I just smirk and walk over to the girls, talk to them for a minute, and after making sure the guys have a clear view from the other side of the bar, I grab my girlfriend's waist and get to it. I return a few minutes later with some ruffled hair and can't help but chuckle at Bert's gaping mouth. He grumbles something about natural charms but keeps his promise. A few drinks later, I get another text. I explained everything to Abby. She had an idea for a second bet. Tell me more. How about you hook up with both of us and leave? I've never texted a thumbs up so fast in my life and started priming Bert to take another bet, essentially bragging about how easy it is to make women putty in your hands if you just know the trick. He's grumpy and a little drunk, and I can tell he'll agree to any bet I make now. Tell you what, I bet that I can take both of these girls home with me right now without any struggles. I can see that Bert is tempted but wary of me.
What's the wager?
If I can't do it, I'll do the entire presentation on Tuesday.
Deal.
Basically, this was an end-of-year presentation going through the contracts we'd gotten during the year and reviewing company income and costs. Me, Bert, and Ernie had been assigned this to do together, and with it being an hour-and-a-half long presentation at least, 3 people talking would be best for everyone. However, this is when Ernie made an already sweet deal even sweeter.
Wait, this doesn't seem fair to me. I think we need to give Bert something more in case he loses.
Bert looks at him cautiously.
What did you have in mind?
And honestly, I'm pretty sure I owe Ernie a kidney for this. I'll be forever grateful to him for this.
Do you still have your Elvis outfit from last Halloween?
Yeah.
And so it was decided, after some prompting, that Bert would do the entire presentation dressed as Elvis in case he lost. FYI, this was sparkly Elvis. Elvis with the hair and white shiny suits. None of that sexy OG Elvis. Long story short, I went up to the girls, tapped on their shoulders where they were standing at the bar, and after a few seconds of seduction, I left with one of them on each arm. 5 minutes later, I get a text from Ernie, showing Bert's face of, "What have I done?" The girls and I went to another bar a few blocks away and then went back home to separate apartments at the end of the night. That Monday, I reminded Bert of his promise, and he reluctantly explained that he'd spent all Sunday getting the suit ready. Tuesday was hands down the best day of my life. We'd already warned our manager of the change in schedule and who'd be making the presentation, and he laughed, but I don't quite think he believed us at the time. Bert enters the presentation as it's about to begin, held in front of our entire department of 50+ people he sees on a daily basis, dressed in full Elvis suit and wig, and starts the presentation. Everyone, including me and Ernie, were laughing so hard for the first 10 minutes he couldn't get a word in, and just stood there waiting for them to stop. The best part though, he did the voice. Once the laughter died down and he could do the presentation properly, he thought, screw that, and went full Elvis. People were chuckling all throughout the presentation. It was a mess. After that chaotic event, he was seen in an even better light than before. People appreciated his bravery and sense of humor. When we told him the truth behind the bets a few months later, he laughed and smacked us on the back, telling us that he'd get us back. I like this one. We don't have a real jerk here, I would say. Someone did really well at their job and let it kind of go to their head a little bit. I'm sure after this, he was humbled just a little bit. I mean, hey, that's great that you did a good job. Everyone's happy for you. Really good. But you don't need to go holding it over everyone else's head. People aren't gonna like that after a little while. Our original poster just wanted to mess with him a little bit, but it was the others around him that really seized the opportunity. It wouldn't have gotten to the level it did if it weren't for them. I told my son's girlfriend that if she keeps disrespecting me, she can get out of my house. I don't care that she's pregnant. I, 43-year-old female, have a son, 18-year-old male, who got his high school girlfriend, 18-year-old female, pregnant. It was obviously an unplanned pregnancy, and it resulted in my son's girlfriend getting kicked out of her house by her mom. I never liked this girl, but I obviously couldn't let her live on the streets now that she's carrying my grandchild. So I let her live in our house. Now, both she and my son gave up on college for the near future, and my son is now working a full-time job so he can provide for them. The problem is that his girlfriend refuses to do anything, absolutely anything, all day. She just locks herself in my son's room, eating snacks and watching videos on my son's computer. I need to drag her out to just help me with the cooking and to clean up at least the room she's staying in. But she always complains about how I'm working her like a slave even though she's already in constant pain because of her pregnancy. And then she'll come crying to my son about my treatment of her. Mind you, she doesn't have a high-risk pregnancy. I know that because me and my husband are the one fully paying for her medical controls. And I don't ask her to do tasks like cleaning the toilet or anything similar. However, she really crossed the line when, after I got dressed up, she asked me where I was going, and when I told her that I'm getting ready for church, her exact response was, "I didn't know there were churches that were allowing people looking like striptease dancers in." At that point, I absolutely had it with her, and I told her straight that I don't care who she is. I won't allow her to disrespect me while living in my house. And if she can't keep her attitude in check, then she can get out of my home. She pretty much started crying at that point and immediately called my son, who later on also gave me attitude for treating his girlfriend like garbage when I don't know what she's going through. My husband also thinks that while she was definitely out of line with that, she was probably only acting out because of pregnancy hormones, and that I could have handled the situation better without straight up threatening to leave her homeless. Am I the jerk? I think this is one of those scenarios where you're both jerks. Absolutely, she was completely out of line with that comment, especially when you guys are going above and beyond to provide her a place to stay and look after her. But the crackback came a little hard, I think. I get that you're offended and lashing out in the moment. But yeah, she is a pregnant 18-year-old girl, pregnant with your grandchild. You can't exactly just leave her with nowhere to stay. But at the same time, she needs to learn to show you the respect you deserve.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. To finish listening to all the stories, check out the playlist at the top of the description. And if you like Am I the Jerk, make sure to subscribe to Am I the Genius. Everything will be linked down below in the description.